ever going to start this podcast you've been talking about for like forever?
Do you think that anyone will actually want to listen to something like this?
What is your plan for an introduction?
Are you sure you want to talk about these topics? People usually disagree.
3 hours? Are you crazy?
Do you think you're some kind of expert or something?
Are you planning to have an intro song?
What if a bunch of people get really mad and hate you over this?
Do you even know how to make a podcast?
Are you just doing this because you like to argue with people?
Don't let this be just one more thing that you talk about doing, but never actually do.
Wouldn't it be better to do just one episode for each topic?
Stop trying to change people's opinions. Just live your own life.
Dude, people are never gonna agree. Just let it go.
Is this going to be a long intro? Because if it is, I'm bored already.
Welcome back to another episode of Why Can't We Talk About That? But first, guess what? The thing that's irritating me today is something that has been irritating me forever. Well, maybe not forever, but at least as long as I've been employed in places where I need to interact with the public. Every job that you have, regardless of the vocation, will most likely have rules that need to be followed. In some jobs, like the many that I have had in the past, and still currently have today, we may be called on to let people know what these rules are, either because they are breaking one of them, or attempting to break one of them, or hoping to find some way that they can break one of them without getting caught. I understand that some rules are stupid, and there are many of them that I may disagree with. But you know what? I don't make them. I have never had a job where I personally made the rules. However, I have had many jobs where I need to enforce the rules that have been created by my employer. But now I'm rambling again. On to what I'm trying to say here. In many of these cases, where I'm put in the position of needing to let someone know what these rules are, there's always some kind of backlash. Sometimes it's in the form of them saying, "Well, I think that rule is stupid." In these cases, I might reply with something along the lines of, "Yep, I agree with you, but you know, I don't make the rules." Pretty simple. These types of backlash don't really bother me very much. Then there are those who attempt to show a bunch of evidence as to why these rules are stupid. Again, I don't make the rules, so my feelings aren't hurt by someone calling them stupid. I may even agree with some of their reasoning behind why they feel the rule is stupid. But again, nothing I can do because I don't make the rules. And also, these kinds of backlashes do not bother me much. The type of backlash that I cannot stand is this one. "Well, sir, you are not allowed to XYZ. "Why not?" Because it's against our rules and policies." "Well, you know, last time I was here, they let me do it." Ugh, this is the most annoying thing ever. Because what are they even saying here? It doesn't make any sense. "Yes, I see that you are showing me that what I want to do is against the rules. But you see, I was here last week and the other employee that worked here let me break that rule." What? So what, am I supposed to also break the rule simply because some other employee did so? That's even assuming this guy's telling me the truth. But let's just assume he is. This should mean, not that I should follow suit and let this guy break the same rules that my coworker let him break, but it should mean that this employee should be called out. So the next time this happens, I'm going to tell the customer, "What was this employee's name? We're going to fire him over this. Thanks for letting us know." Of course, that isn't at all what the customer wants, nor does he even know the employee's name most likely. But he doesn't want any of that. He just wants to be able to do what he wants. He is not interested in following rules. He's only interested in getting what he is hoping to get. Ridiculous. But what is not ridiculous is today's episode. My guest today is Brianna Mocan, someone I have known since she was probably around 3 or 4 years old. This episode was a long time coming. She contacted me back in season 1 before I had remote access, and since she lives in Washington State, we had to wait for a time when she would be visiting family in California. Brianna jump-started her adult life very early. She has already spent time in the military, gotten married, and has 2 children, with a third on the way at the recording of this episode. We have a great discussion and talked about many things that have never been mentioned on this show before. Topics discussed in this episode are tri-tip, strawberries, the military, Sublime, the OC Supertones, the aging process, West Coast beach music, dirty heads, jumping out of planes, globalism, Israel, being raised as a California hippie, Homebirth, Midwives, the man behind the curtain, Iration, stick figure, California weather, homeschooling, the nuclear family, raising children, spanking, because I said so, breastfeeding, mom shaming, the FDA, China, Russia, abortion, the church as family, Torah observance, charismatic Pentecostals, speaking in tongues, drinking alcohol, pleasing God, outreach, and barefoot shoes. You will also notice that for all of your listening pleasure, I have brought back my just gotten over being sick sexy voice that hasn't been heard since episode 10 of season 1. You are welcome. Enjoy the conversation.
To here?
Yeah.
Because you're up in Seattle area?
Right, yeah, so Everett, it's about an hour north of Seattle. Because my husband works for Boeing.
Okay. Is that near like Bremerton and like the kind of that area, or?
I don't know where Bremerton is.
Everett, I feel like that one, I knew somebody else that lived there and I can't remember who it was now.
We're about maybe 45 minutes to an hour north of Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah, so Everett is a huge port town. Mm-hmm. There's a big naval base there and a huge Amazon warehouse because all the ships coming from China will go to Seattle.
Right.
Usually.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what brought you guys up there to begin with, was the job, or were you stationed up there?
It was God, like 100%.
Okay.
When I joined the Army, turned 18, my parents told me I had to leave, and I didn't really have money for college, so I was like, all right, like, I felt like I had no guidance from, like, my school or even the church. That was rough.
Yeah.
So, like, joined the military.
Right.
I ended up in North Carolina. Had a kind of a planned elopement, which was really fun.
Because you had met your husband before you went into the Army, or did you meet him in the Army?
I met him right before I joined the Army.
Okay.
Yeah, so fun story with that. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like the summer after high school came around and I was kind of trying to join the Coast Guard, but it was taking a while because they only do their training like twice a year apparently.
Okay.
So you have to it's a really small branch. So the timing of it, like I missed the first time, so I'd have to wait another 6 months. And I wasn't sure I really wanted to be in the military. It's just felt like my only option.
Right.
And we were going to go out to dinner for my mom's birthday, and we all wanted to go to Ribline. But she wanted to go to McClintock's.
Okay.
And I met my husband there. He was a busser.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He was cleaning a clean table that was next to us. And,
wanted to get a little closer to you, huh?
He did. He was having the waitress ask me about a lot of personal questions. Just me.
Yeah.
Just me. Personal questions about like if I was a tourist or if I lived in the area.
Yeah.
And I was, just saying like, yeah, I just graduated. Don't really know what I want to do, but probably going to join the Coast Guard. And he just pops into the conversation, sits down at our table, starts talking to my parents, my family, and he ended up getting my phone number, which is just so funny. Yeah, because I'm like, all right, I guess like I'm 18 and I still live with my parents, but okay, like this is fun.
And you're getting ready to leave soon, so I mean, for me, like if I was interested, I'd be like, oh, that would have been like never mind then. Because I don't want to do the long distance thing, but. That's cool. Well, it worked out for you, obviously.
Yeah.
Third kid on the way, and and how old are you now? You're about Laura's age, 24, 25? 24. Okay.
Yeah, I just turned 24 in September.
Okay. Man.
Yeah, it was funny because when we walked in, like, I guess Michael, my husband, immediately got this feeling like something was going to happen. And this came in later to the story, so I don't know how true that is. He says he got a feeling. Yeah.
It's like in the movies, like when doves start flying around, the music, it's like all this stuff, like a light shining on you from heaven.
Yeah. He claims that he got this feeling, but I didn't hear that until like 2 years after we were married. Okay. So it's just really funny.
That's awesome.
My dad immediately was like, this guy keeps looking at you. And like by this point, like I've heard it a million times.
Right.
Like this is never true.
You're like, it's just my dad being ridiculous, right?
Yeah. And even my mom was like, he's not looking at her. Like you need to just like enjoy our dinner.
Right.
And he ends up sitting at our table and talking to us.
That's so awesome.
It was just great.
And it was your mom's idea to go to McClintock's. Because where did you want to go?
All of us wanted to go to Ribline.
I never heard of that place. Ribline?
Ribline.
Is that a restaurant or like a steakhouse?
It's probably one of the best places in the beach area to get tri-tip
it's around
sandwiches. No, so it's the original location I think is in Grover Beach. That's where, like right before the dunes, that like main strip of stores. They moved locations literally like across the street. Okay. And they kind of changed a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
And now there's a new location in Slow.
Okay.
They're really good, though. Yeah.
What should I get when I go my first time? What do you recommend?
I think my family really liked for appetizers. They're something called beach balls.
That sounds kind of scary. I don't know.
It's like I think it's like cream cheese filled something with like bacon and
I'm already sold on that then.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I usually just get tri-tip sandwiches though.
Okay. They have good ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when we're in town, apparently Santa Maria, the Central Coast, is the only place in the entire country that even knows what a tri-tip is.
I know. But it's funny
wild.
is you go other places and you see it on the menu as Santa Maria style tri-tip.
It never is.
Right? I know, it's totally different. Like, it's like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like way different, you know?
Yeah.
But I always think it's neat to see that because, I mean, we'll be in another state sometimes and it'll say Santa Maria. Like, Santa Maria? Who knows where Santa Maria is? Like, nobody. Except those of us that grew up here, you know. But
unless people look at their strawberries.
Right.
Which, like I do. I always make sure my strawberries, it'll either say Watsonville or Santa Maria.
Because they're hard to get up where you're at, huh? Because my cousin lives up in just north of Portland. He's in Washington, but he's just north of Portland, and they have the same because they grew up here.
Yeah.
And they miss the strawberries because we can't get those. So sometimes when when we drive up there, we'll bring them a flat or something, you know, and just to be like, oh, here you go, you know, because they miss that for sure. But
yeah, which North Carolina, you couldn't find a good strawberry to save your life.
Yeah,
it's like all of the throwaway ones that like people here would never touch.
Right.
Like the small ones that are still white because they chemically ripen them.
Oh,
that's why. Anytime you have a strawberry, if it's white on the inside at all, it means that it was chemically ripened.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because fruit ripens from the inside out, the strawberry does.
Interesting.
So to get them to ripen faster, they ripen them so that they turn red, but the inside will still be sour and bitter.
Okay.
So it should be red all the way through.
Okay, that's good to know. I never knew that.
Oh man, after COVID, I dove so hard into looking behind every closed door, turning over every rock that I thought something suspicious was going on.
Right.
And it really started with birth because I was pregnant with my first.
Right.
And I was in the Army, and you do not get good care when you're in the Army. It's all the doctors that like failed medical school, so they join the Army.
That's where all the rejects go, huh?
Yeah.
Oh man. All right.
The Army is notorious for not taking care of people well. You know, you'll break your arm and they throw some ibuprofen and tell you to get back to work.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I had food poisoning and they told me to go back to work the same day.
But we'll get into that for sure. But but first we go into music. It's pretty easy one.
Yeah.
So I like to just start with like, what's your earliest like memory of the first time you were like, oh man, like I love that song, I love that artist, I love that whatever it was. Even whether you were 2 years old or 15, it doesn't matter. Just like, what's the earliest thing?
I remember. This is going to be so funny. My dad was like working a lot because he always worked with his hands, and the time that we would have together that was like just him and I was literally so that he can drive to the gas station to get cigarettes. So I would be in his pickup truck and he would just talk to me about life, and there would always be like 90s music playing basically. Okay. Because that's the generation.
Yeah, he's my age, so that's when we grew up. So, yeah. So
I feel like I really grew up listening to Sublime. Nice. That was like baseline for me. Okay. And like we went to church, but also like I feel like there's this like two sides to the way that I've grown up with music. Like there's like the church music and then there's everything else. Okay. And I always wish there was something in the middle. That had the style of everything else, but actually was like glorifying to God.
Like better lyrics.
Yeah. And like the only band that even comes close is Supertones.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably hear that a lot.
Well, that was true for me. Like when I remember because I loved Sublime before I got saved, and then of course their lyrics are kind of offensive in some of the songs. But I remember the first time I heard "Lift Me Up" by Supertones, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like a Sublime song, you know? But it's like Christian. I was like, this is so cool, you know? So Supertones for me was one of my first Christian bands I ever listened to. Yeah. So they're kind of important to me as well. So
I got to go to one of their concerts growing up. Yeah.
Nice.
It was really cool.
Where was that at?
I think it was in Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was like my mom's birthday or something, and it just happened to be around that time. Okay. So yeah, we all drove down and it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really small, just like a church
Oh, no way.
Really small church, yeah.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Oh, man. Well, I was in my, I don't know, probably 6th grade, because I was wearing, like, the skulls and all black, and I was,
okay.
like...
You were a goth kid?
Yeah, just for, like, a year or two.
Okay.
That was a rough time.
Yeah. So 6th grade would have been, what year for you? That was...
Oh, man.
You were born, what, 98?
I was born in 1999.
Okay.
So
6th grade.
I was probably like 10 or 11. So I'd say like probably 2010 or 2011.
Okay.
Abouts.
I'm just trying to to figure out like what the timeline is as far as like which albums had been out by them and like what popularity they had. Because if they're playing in a small church like that, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because you feel more, it's more intimate. You know, a lot of those bands when they get so big, you just can't do that anymore. You know.
I think at the end they had like kind of had a big break from music,
right?
And then they just came out with probably what was their last album ever. Mm-hmm. And I think right after that, they like stopped playing. Yeah. Yeah, it was around that time. Well,
they stopped for a long because me and your parents were at their final show, what they were calling their final show at Biola down in L.A. And we went to that, and then a couple years later, they released another album. It's like, what?
I think that was probably
and they started touring again. It's like, what do you do? What?
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember the album was orange, and it had a bunch of different types of guitars and instruments.
Oh yeah, that is the one they released after they broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot the name of that.
They were just releasing that and selling their merch and stuff. And
Glory maybe isn't the name of that album? For the Glory, or I don't remember the name of it.
Probably.
I have that one though. Yeah.
They have this really cool song on there for women, like girls and women in the church, and it's called Beautiful. Mm-hmm. But it talks about like little girls, daughters, and then I think wives, and then moms when they're like older, and like how gray hair is like a crown of glory and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the opposite, right, of culture today. Yeah. It's like women are trying to hide their grays, and they're trying to, you know. I always tell Bethany, I was like, man, I'm ready. I embrace it. I want to have, when I get really old, I want to have like long, I want to look like Gandalf, you know, and have like a big long gray beard and like just like, I think that's cool, you know.
I love when people embrace the aging process. Yeah. That has definitely not been in my family, just generationally.
Right.
I don't know probably just for women, it's harder. They're so judgmental. Sure. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like I've been able to kind of break that generational issue that everyone's having, because I do not care. Yeah. I have gotten my hair, I trim my hair like once a year, and if it goes gray, it goes gray, or like I don't care.
Is that different now because you're married and you figure he loves you and he's with you, so who cares? But like before you got married, were you a little more vain, or you didn't care then either?
No, I didn't care then. I had a full head of dreadlocks.
I remember that.
For like a month in high school. I remember that, yeah. And I kept several just like under like the rest of my straight hair. Yeah. And when I met my husband, I only had 2 or 3 left. And he hated them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I took those out. And that's fine. Like, I always tell him if he ever did want me to get my dreads back, I would, because I miss them.
You like that?
Just a couple of them.
Do you like
full head again.
Like the way it looks, or do you like it's pretty low maintenance, right? Once you get that going.
Yeah. Okay. Because I love having long hair, but it's so much to deal with, especially because I don't get it cut professionally. It's like $400 for women to regularly get their hair cut around here, like not like styled and color and stuff. Yeah. I'm not that person. No.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I trimmed it once like 2 years ago. So it's a lot of maintenance to deal with because of that.
You just do it yourself, or you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just have some rusty kitchen scissors.
Yeah. I mean, like men's haircuts are cheap too. They're like $20, but I mean, I've been shaving my own head since I was a sophomore in high school, and I just like, I haven't been to the barber probably since. Yeah. That's not true. There was one time where I grew my hair out long. Mm-hmm. Like I think it was years ago. I think Aiden was like 2 or 3, and and Bethany hated it. She hates when I have long hair, so I was going to surprise her and shave it all off, but it was long. I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, when it's that long, I don't know how to cut it myself. So I actually went to the barbershop over there in Orchid and had them buzz me down, and then just showed up at home and freaked her out, so she was excited about that. But
yeah,
that's, man.
My husband started out looking like he was in the military, super, in fact he was going to join the military, but like God changed the plan.
Yeah,
that's fine. But he in the gym like 4 hours a day, and
oh wow.
When we would go out to restaurants and we were eating, he would bring his own food, like the chicken and rice and broccoli.
Oh, because he was on like a diet kind of thing.
Yeah,
okay.
He was like very serious into bodybuilding, and he had like the short military hair. And now it's so funny. After 5 years of being married to me, he's starting to grow his hair out long, and he's got a beard.
Oh
he
yeah,
looks like he's very West Coast.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I changed him.
Yeah, he's fitting in up there in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah,
that's cool.
I'm not sure anybody fits in the Pacific Northwest. Honestly,
it's getting bad. I mean, I don't know if it's getting bad where you guys are, but
yeah.
But I used to love Seattle. I used to love Portland. Those are two of my favorite cities to walk around. And the last few times I've been there, it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be here walking around with my kids. I know that much, so.
A few times we've been to Seattle, we just stick to like Pike Place.
Yeah.
Because it's still nice there. But the rest of the city it looks like Los Angeles.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the bubonic plague broke out any minute. It's bad.
Yeah.
And it's sad because there's a million programs for people. The only thing that you have to do to be in a homeless shelter is to test clean on a drug test.
Yeah.
So I always tell people I do not feel bad, because if they wanted to like get their life together, they needed to stop doing drugs.
Right.
And there's plenty of programs for that too.
Yeah. They have to want to, though.
Yeah, they have to want to.
Right. That's the hard part.
But I think the main reason people get into drugs is because there's been some trauma that happens to them.
Oh, sure.
And then that's the only way they deal with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I watch it happen at the library. Like, I literally will watch, because you can tell when a young girl's on the streets, right? You see her come in, but when she first starts coming in, she's clean, has all her teeth, she's pretty, she's, all these things. And then as you watch as the months go by, just this deterioration, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Look like Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Exactly. And it doesn't take long.
Regular, hobbit-like creature, and then suddenly 300 years later,
it's just,
only
exactly.
It's like 3 months later.
Right. And it's really, really sad to watch, and we see it all the time over there. But so. All right, so Supertones.
Yes, back to the music.
Yes, let's go with Supertones a little more. So,
okay. I wrote down some stuff.
Okay.
Not about Supertones, but basically like that, the whole genre of music like that. I honestly don't know how to describe it to people that ask me what kind of music I like. I just say West Coast beach music. Because
that fits.
That's all I can say.
Yeah. There's
a few exceptions like Hawaii, and then there's a band called Ballyhoo that's from Maryland.
Okay.
But you would think that they were from Orange County, the way that their music sounds.
Okay.
Yeah. And most of the music I listen to, I'd say 50-50 on my Spotify Wrapped every year, which is, for those who don't know, like Spotify Wrapped is...
I don't know. I don't have Spotify either, so...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man, you're missing out.
I know, everybody keeps telling me that, but...
Yeah, I mean, I pay, I think, like $7 a month, but I can listen to anything I want at any time, and then they give me suggested music, and I've been able to really expand my palette.
And that's how you learn other bands that you've never heard of before?
Yeah.
Okay, because it'll be like, if you like this band, maybe you'll like this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think before streaming, when everything was more reasonably priced, people would actually be able to go to concerts and like hear the people that were opening for bands, and those bands would get bigger. And I feel like nobody really discovers music that way anymore, because concerts are so expensive. And I think maybe they always have been, but it's really rough now. Everybody's got to be dual income to be able to even live in this area.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
But kind of like a list of music that I like. I would say, other than like Supertones and like growing up listening to like the 90s, I guess ska, punk, beachy music. Remember the movie Surf's Up?
With the penguins?
Yes.
Yeah.
That whole soundtrack was like, I would listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
Since the movie came out, and I have had a iPod, now phone. Stand Tall has been my ringtone for when I get up every morning.
Is that a song?
Yeah.
Who's that by?
Dirty Heads.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've heard that. I'm not sure. I've seen the movie, so if it's in the movie, I've heard it, but
yeah,
I don't remember that one. I have to look that one up.
I actually just went to a Dirty Heads concert with my mom a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Avila Beach Golf Resort.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. They play. They have pretty good bands that come at Avila Beach.
Well, I know like Rancid and Dropkick Murphys played there a couple years ago. I didn't go, but a bunch of people I know went.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it seems like a cool venue.
I've seen Revolution there twice.
Okay.
And I've also seen Revolution in North Carolina. You can tell that they do not like playing in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
All of the concerts that I went to in North Carolina, the bands, like, you could tell that they were not vibing.
Yeah.
Here in Avila, they get into it.
Well, they're local here, right? Aren't they from somewhere around here?
I think Revolution's from Santa Barbara.
Okay. So fairly local.
I think their lead singer's from the Bay.
Okay.
The area. But I think the rest of them are from Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't heard anything by them.
They're really
Everybody
good.
talks about them around here. Like, that's why I assumed they were semi-local anyway.
Yeah.
But
well, one of the things I was going to mention about Revolution is that they're a great band, but they've been so established for the last few years that I feel like they haven't been putting out any new music or any like good new music. All of the new music that they've been putting out the last few years has been like revamps of their old songs.
Oh, okay.
Like going more into like the electric kind of dance.
Like kind of changing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll take an old album or some old songs of theirs and they'll change up the whole vibe of the song.
Which is, people should know that for most people that's not a hit. That's not a favorite.
No.
Like those of us that have these bands we love and these songs we love.
Yeah.
We don't want you to change it. You know, keep it the same. We like it, you know, and then you hear this remix or this revamped version. You're like, what is this? This is awful. Like, what are you doing?
They released an entire album as if it was a brand new album, but it was all these old songs that were not beachy at all. And it was like, I don't know if you guys are actually making money off of this, but you're not reaching your base.
Right.
I don't know anybody that listens to them that actually enjoys that.
Right. Exactly.
Because I think maybe their labels are pushing them.
That's
to
what
go
I was going
more,
to say. That's
like
usually
radio.
what it is. Yeah. They're usually like, the labels are like, hey, your albums aren't selling as much as we want them to. Let's kind of tweak your sound a little bit. And, you know, and sometimes the band just goes along with it because they're like, whatever's.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like Dirty Heads has been my favorite band for a long time.
And what kind of music is that? Is that like reggae or ska?
Oh man, you have to listen to them. They're everything.
Okay.
They do rap. All of their songs are different. So they've got the rap, they've got the punk, they've got the slow reggae, like really calm, beachy music. They've got everything in between.
Okay.
I would say there's probably not a single genre other than maybe country that they don't touch.
I like that.
And even then, like they'll do songs with other people. There's one that was more of like that, I want to call it like a modern square dancing, like folk song, but more like radio
kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, they appeared on one of those songs and it came on. I think it was called like Renegade.
Okay.
It's really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love when bands do that. Like you can listen to a whole album and it just sounds like so many different styles and stuff. That's what's cool about Sublime.
Yeah.
Right? Sublime was great at that.
It's different.
They'd have like a speed punk song followed like a full-on reggae song and then like a ska song, and it's just like, dude, this is awesome.
I love it. And the great thing about Dirty Heads is they're their own sound. They just have such a range. Their range is, they can do anything.
Right.
And I was telling my husband, because we listen to them on the way back. We drive from Washington here every time we want to come visit.
Right.
We had a spontaneous trip a few weeks ago, so this was the third like 20-hour drive we've done in the last month. Wow. It's crazy. Wow. It's worth it though.
Yeah.
It's worth it. We missed the beach.
Yeah. You guys don't like to fly?
I hate flying.
Oh, okay.
I was in the Army. My job was to pack parachutes. So, like, because you pack parachutes, they expect you to jump with them pretty frequently.
Oh, so you've actually jumped out of planes before?
Many, like, probably 50 times.
Oh, see, I wouldn't like jumping out of planes. I don't mind flying, like, in a jet, but I wouldn't want to jump out. You know, if I'm jumping out of a plane, it's because the plane's going down or something, you know?
Well, it was really fun at first, and it's not anything like skydiving. You're not, like, thousands of feet in the air. You're only about maybe 1,000 feet in the air, plus, maybe a couple 100 feet. And you're attached to a static line. So you've got a parachute on. It's huge. It's not like the skydiving parachutes. They're bulky. They're heavy. And then there's this rope, this the rope, it's called a static line, that's attached to a cable in the plane. And then you jump out. And as you're falling, the rope releases the chute for you, and you can't steer it.
Ooh. You
can't steer the parachute, so you're at the mercy of the wind.
Oh my gosh.
They're incredibly... They say you can steer it, but you can't. You're just pulling on the risers. And...
that's like Panic Attack City for me right there. There's no way I would do something like that.
It was really fun at first. You go into the recruiter's office and they're hyping it up. Like, you get to jump out of planes, you get to skydive for a living.
So you knew that going in that was going to be part of your job?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like the only reason I really picked that job. And because parachute riggers, we get to wear red hats and everybody else gets to wear regular hats. So
that was a draw for you.
Yeah. I was like, I want the red baseball cap.
Yeah.
It was really fun. I loved it at first, and then because the nature of it, of jumping out of the planes and falling that way, you see a lot of people get hurt and also killed for absolutely no reason other than they had to fill a quota for the plane that day. There was a perfectly healthy girl that jumped on one that I was supposed to jump on right after I came back from maternity leave. Nothing wrong with her chute. She just landed on her head wrong and died. And
so the chute opened.
Perfect weather.
And she floated down, but she somehow landed on her head?
She somehow landed wrong. It was determined that it wasn't the Packers' fault. The chute opened fine and it landed just fine. It was something about her landing. Like, maybe she landed on a rock or something the wrong way. The drop zones are not taken care of. There's, cactuses out there and trees.
And this is all just training, right? This isn't even, in a war or anything. No. This is just...
No, it's just... Wow. It's the pride of the Army. I'm telling you, they do so many outdated, ridiculous, dangerous things just because it's tradition. And people get killed because of it.
Yeah.
I, used to be really patriotic for training. And
I was going to say, you don't seem very pro-Army these days.
No. I'm not a military supporter anymore.
Okay.
And that's probably the most controversial thing to a certain demographic of people.
Right.
Will tell well, how could you have been in the military and you don't like the military anymore? It's because I've been in.
Well, right. I mean, you have firsthand,
yeah,
knowledge of things that most of us don't have.
I would say 90% of the people that are in are not heroes or even trying to be. There's a bunch of kids that got kicked out of their parents' house at 18.
Yeah.
Or the older generation that joined during 9/11 because they wanted to do something. They're all mostly starting to retire now. Okay. It's been about 20 years. Okay. So they're all getting out, which means that everybody after that was, fighting a war that was about oil. It wasn't really about terrorism.
Now, you guys that are on the inside, do you know that?
Yeah.
Going in, because a lot of that stuff, there's I talk always about conspiracy theories on here and stuff, but there's people that'll say stuff like that, and they'll say, the government this and the government that, and my response is you don't really know. That's a good theory, but you don't know because you're not in there. These are all just based on things, but people that are in, you see things.
People give the government way too much credit. They think the government is this... Or? They think the government's in charge of so many things, but it's really the economic powerhouses of the world. It's the wealthy. It's the globalism. Okay. That's what it is. Those are the people that are pulling the strings. They're the ones that are funding people and asking them for favors. And the politicians, honestly, I feel like most of them have absolutely no idea what's going on. They're just getting paid. Right. In the military, because the chain of command works the way that it does, you know nothing. Nobody knows anything more than what their rank allows. Okay. Even, I would say, maybe generals have a little bit more insight of higher knowledge of what's going on in the White House, but even then, they don't do much more than war.
So you think that the group of people that really knows what's going on is a pretty small group? Yeah. Okay.
I would say it's an incredibly small group. Right. I know that people want to talk about how there's all the World Economic Forum is planning the Great Reset, and like they're planning for another world war that's going to usher in the one world government.
Right.
And I believe that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that most people in power actually are aware of what's going on more than 1 or 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
I think that there's a very small amount of incredibly wealthy people that have been planning stuff like this for a long time.
Right.
And just one step at a time. It's really orchestrated, I think, purely by Satan.
Right.
And
which, unless people have a biblical understanding, they're not going to understand that part anyway.
Yeah.
They might see the greedy people, they might see the money grab and all that kind of stuff, but they don't understand that it's all orchestrated by, spiritual forces and things like that.
And that's why I don't believe that you can possibly detangle politics from religion.
Right.
There's no way. Everybody's worldview, what they believe about spiritual powers or the lack of thereof, it all goes into their worldview. Because for somebody that doesn't believe in a spiritual realm, doesn't believe in God, this is all random. All of these events are meaningless.
Right.
There's nothing behind it.
They wouldn't say it that way, but you and I wouldn't. We know that because what's the alternative? If they say there is no God, there's no spiritual forces doing it, it's like, well, then what's the point?
Yeah, we're all just hairless talking monkeys.
Yeah,
so
exactly, right.
Yeah,
right. And but you look at that and you see that there is like design and orchestration happening, and you think somebody's doing it. I mean, you can't just use it's nobody. It's just nothing. It's just random. It's like, no, that's obviously not true.
Yeah.
You can argue and say it's not God. You could say it's people. You could say it's space aliens or whatever you want to say. But the whole it's nothing argument just makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how somebody could have lived through the last few years and think that there's not some spiritual force behind the things that are going on right now.
Right.
The tension that's between people is not normal.
I know.
We've been living for thousands of years, and this amount of tension and this amount of chaos on a worldwide scale, it's talked about only in Revelation.
Right.
And I mean, people got to read their Bible to find that out, but like Christians know what's going on, and I like people. There's a certain branch of Christianity too that I feel like is kind of fearful for the end of the world. Like you'll talk to somebody like my dad, for example, who panics over everything and says to like, be careful, like look out, be paranoid. And I can't live like that.
Right.
Who can?
Right.
Like we know that there's this crazy war in Israel going on right now.
Yeah.
And it's been talked about in Revelation.
Right.
That like every nation will come against the land of Israel. And then we'll have the Antichrist rise. And
do you think that's because people have been against Israel forever.
Yeah.
But do you think what's happening in Israel right now with Hamas and all that is leaning towards the Antichrist being revealed, or do you think we're still a far ways off from that?
Well, the Bible talks about how it'll come in like labor pains.
Right.
And as somebody, which I'll talk about with natural birth, I'm about to be planning my third home birth, my third baby.
Oh, you have them at home?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other rabbit hole I'd like to go down. But
I'll write that down so we'll come back to it.
Yes, birth. But the labor pains of birth they're not predictable at first. Like you can kind of feel them, and then as labor progresses, like gets more painful and there's less time between them, and like world events I think will be happening closer and closer together.
Okay.
And they'll be more and more painful every single time. And then the end of the world when Satan declares that he's God and Jesus comes back to come in.
Do you think you could put like a timeline on that in your opinion? Like, do you think it's going to be within your lifetime, or do you think it's going to be like your grandkids' lifetime?
I don't know. I think that we should always be prepared for our lifetime.
Yeah.
I think that's the duty of a Christian, because even in like the book of Acts, they were talking about how we're living in the end times. That was 2,000 years ago.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can go back in history and 100 years, and there's always people saying, oh, the Antichrist is going to be revealed in our lifetime. And the end of the world is going to be in our lifetime. And, and it's just not. you know.
Yeah, I think that's also why the Bible says to prepare, to run the race with endurance. Because like we should always be prepared for the coming of Christ.
Right.
We should always be living like today's our last day.
Live like there's no tomorrow.
Yep. Like you can, I know this is cliche, but you can get hit by a bus tomorrow, and that could be it for you.
Did you ever see Final Destination, that movie?
Which one?
The first one. The original.
I think I've seen the original, but I've probably seen 3 randomly, like 4 or 5 times in my life.
Well, you just reminded me of that scene where the girl, it's after they're already off the plane, right? They cheated death and or whatever, but it's like picking them off one by one, and that girl's like yelling at the other one. She's crossing the crosswalk, and that bus just flies by and just slams it. It comes out of nowhere, and everybody in the theater's like, "Whoa, what in the world just happened?" It just is totally shocking. But
I like to live every day like it's my last.
Yeah. That's good philosophy, I think.
It also comes along, I think, with just being raised as a California hippie. You know? We need to enjoy life.
Who is a hippie, your mom or your dad?
Neither.
I didn't think so.
No.
Yeah.
That's just me.
You're just born a hippie.
I think so. I think it was always there. And probably somewhere around junior high, I felt really drawn to surfing. Probably because of like Mark Arkinson was the youth pastor in junior high, and he was talking about surfing. But like there is just something about like I can really feel really connected to this thing, and it matched in so well with like my upbringing,
right?
Of like going back to music, like just that style of music. I think really puts in your heart of like a certain way of life that you want to live. Right. At least, the less violent.
Yeah. Well, describe that for me. Like, describe that lifestyle you're talking about. Like, what do you envision when you listen to that music? Yeah. Like, where does it put you?
Honestly, it's the California state of mind.
Okay.
It's the Gold Coast. It's this peace, this relaxing, I want to live on the beach my whole life feeling. And I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want anybody to bother me. Right. I want to live.
To each their own kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is probably a really lame way of describing but honestly, it is really just a vibe. It's if you know what I'm talking about, then you feel it. But I feel like for people that don't know, then they don't know, and it's not for them. Right. And that's okay.
But do you think there's like people that grew up, let's say in Chicago or something, where it's freezing in the it's sweltering in the summer, but they don't have beaches really and that kind of thing there? It's not like the California beach life anyway. Do you think there's anybody over there that maybe hears that kind of music and gets that same feel, or do you think it's because you grew up on the Central Coast, you've been to the beach a lot, we used to go to bonfires all the time when all you guys were little and all that kind of stuff. So do you think that's a bigger part of it, or do you think it can still happen for people that don't have that?
Well, I mean, Los Angeles is full of transplants from all over, and I think that they feel a really strong connection to this way of life. But I think for me, like this is probably way too much embedded into my identity as who I am as a Christian, but I really feel like I and California are like one. Okay. This is just my home. Yeah. I feel such a strong connection to being here.
So do you feel like displaced when you were in the military in North Carolina and
in Washington,
and even living in Washington now?
Yeah, so this will be my 6th year not living here as of April. Okay. And man, it really feels like I have not had a home. It's been rough.
So what's preventing you guys from coming back here? Is it financial?
Money. Yeah, it's the money.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's so crazy.
They say once you move out of California, you can't move back.
Yeah.
Unless you're a doctor or a lawyer or something. You got all kinds of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is something I was kind of touching on earlier, but like God has been really working in our life right now. We've been praying to come back for a long time. When I was in the Army, I obviously couldn't leave legally. And my husband was finishing college while I was in. We were 1 week away from having to leave military housing after I got out of the Army. And then my husband found out early that he got a job at Boeing in Washington. Oh, wow. And like our house was packed. We had the moving truck. We just didn't know where we were going. And then he found out he was going to Washington. And we were on the road when he accepted the offer officially.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
There was a malfunction with the system, and they said that he needed to reapply so they can accept him. Mm-hmm. And that's how he found out. Wow. So they were already going to accept him, and we just didn't know. And we wouldn't have found out for like another month if that didn't happen.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It almost makes you think maybe there's a God or something.
Yeah. Well, and then
crazy concept.
We've been doing so poorly in Washington mentally. It seems so fun to be back on the West Coast, but the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Seattle area is cold and rainy for more than 9 months out of the year.
Yeah.
We get a few months of sunshine in the summer, and then it goes right back to being gloomy.
Right.
It's not just the rain, it's the fact that there's a dark cloud.
Yeah.
100% of the time, morning and night.
Yeah.
And there's a spiritual cloud too, I would say.
Oh yeah.
It's really hard living in that kind of condition. And I miss home, especially having a third kid. Even though like my family isn't exactly like perfect, nobody's is. Right. I would rather be here with them than somewhere else. Yeah. And then, like I mentioned, my husband's brother unexpectedly did die on Thursday, and we felt this huge shift happen to where like we know that God's going to be doing something. We were at the funeral home a few days ago, and then my husband got a text from a family friend saying that they're hiring in Santa Maria.
Oh, wow.
And that he wants to see Michael as an interview.
In the same field or something totally different?
In aerospace. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my husband's an industrial engineer, and Boeing is paying for his master's degree. And then, like, he's supposed to work there for another 2 or 3 years after, but we're just gonna like take the loan with them so we can come back home. Okay. But this area is so competitive and hard to get into. You have to have a lot of experience and basically a master's degree to be able to make a living here.
But he's already got it in, you said, most likely, right? Because this is a friend of his that's gonna...
Yes, you know this person.
Oh, I do?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Which I, just for privacy, I won't say. But,
yeah.
So we were at the funeral home. My husband got a message saying that like they're hiring, that he's going to be like talking about that, about getting a job.
So it could be fairly soon that you guys come back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like God is, I don't even know how to describe the amount of change that God has put into our family in the last month.
Yeah.
I, at random, a few months ago, decided I wanted to apply for midwifery school. Okay. So I'm really passionate about home birth.
Yeah, because when you have home births, you've had 2 now, and you're going to have a third. So you have a midwife there with you at the house. Okay.
Yeah. I would recommend it to anybody. There's nothing dangerous about it. In fact, it has better outcomes for moms and babies than the hospital does.
Well, the argument is always in the rare occurrence that there's a medical emergency, right? You have to get to the hospital where all the,
I would say that's honestly kind of BS. Yeah. Most people are so uneducated about childbirth. It's crazy. Women don't even know about how their own fertility works most of the time. Right. And it's really just Canada and the United States that's like that. Women all over the world can take care of themselves a lot more than they can here. Sure. We know nothing about how our bodies work.
Well, I think it's because we put so much trust in the experts. Yeah. The experts. And we just believe what they ever said. Like this isn't home birth. We never went that far with it, but with the first 2 kids, we did Lamaze, which is,
it's a method.
It's a method. Yeah. But then for the second 2, starting with Addie, we did Bradley. And that blew my mind. That opened up so much for me to where I was like, because they were like, no, don't just do whatever the doctor says. Yeah. Right? Ask him why we don't need to, or even tell him we don't need to do that. Yeah. I felt educated to where I didn't have to, because, if you don't know anything, I want to trust the guy who's got the PhD. I don't want my kid to die or something because I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do it my way. Who am I? I don't know anything.
But then you realize the guy with the PhD is trained in a way where policy hasn't changed in 19 years since research, which is wild when I tell people that it takes an average of 19 years for hospital policy to change once new information has been discovered.
Right.
And
why do you think that is?
Money.
Yeah.
100%. Hospitals make more money off of C-sections. Mm-hmm. So if you can create an emergency, and if you can tell, it's not even the providers, I feel, they are doing what they were taught, but they're only taught intervention. Right. They're not even taught how real physiological birth is supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. They're not even trained in how to do breech births, which is extremely safe and normal to
really?
do. Yes.
Okay, so that's funny because I've always heard that that's like big time scary stuff there.
No, it's because they're uneducated about it.
Okay.
And they think it's scary because all they know is that the baby has to come out with their head first.
Right.
But it's a presentation of normal.
Okay.
There's midwives that are trained in breech that are able to do it very safely. Mm-hmm. I know a mama back in Washington that had a twin breech birth at home.
That both babies were breech?
Yep.
Crazy.
Really cool.
Wow.
Really cool. Yeah. It's completely safe. It's completely normal. People freak out about the littlest things, even like, oh, the cords are on the neck. That literally does nothing. Mm-hmm. The baby's going to be tangled up.
Right.
There's no risk at all with the cord being around a neck. It's like a wet pasta noodle. If you tied a wet pasta noodle around your neck, it's not going to do anything to you. And it's still supplying the baby with oxygen and blood.
Yeah. So you don't think there's ever been an instance where the cord around the neck was a problem?
No.
Ever?
No, I would say the only time it might be an issue if the cord is really short, it might keep the baby from descending down the canal. But that's usually not an issue. But there's never a strangulation.
No. So because when Alora, which was our first, obviously, but we knew nothing.
Yeah.
They had told us that. When she was in the womb, he said, oh, I can see the cords around the neck.
Yeah.
So and he wanted to induce for that reason, right? And we told him no. That's the funny thing to me is that Bethany and I were like, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I look back on that now and I think, why would we say that? With our first one, we didn't know anything. And we're telling the doctor,
intuition.
No, let's not do that. I guess, yeah, it must have been a God thing or whatever. Yeah. But that's funny too because we weren't even saved then.
Yeah.
But he was still working in our lives anyway. But I remember specifically when she came out, it was around her neck, and he just lifted it up over her head.
Yeah. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
People, I lifted the cord around my baby's neck. Totally fine. Autumn came out, it's called a double nuchal and it's wrapped around, so it's a nuchal and it's wrapped around, but she had it wrapped around twice and her arm was up by her head like Superwoman.
Nice.
So she came out like the craziest way possible. She's fine.
Yeah. And she's your first, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's extremely safe. And in fact, so midwives are only trained in birth. They're trained in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. They're experts on it, on natural birth. They have very special schools for midwives.
Right.
It's heavily based in apprenticeship, but also academic. So I'm going to be doing all my academics online, but apprenticeship will be like 4 years.
And that's just like being with another midwife while they're doing births?
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be observe and then assist, and then I'll be like main person. But women, when they educate themselves on natural childbirth, they can do it. There's nothing that they can't do.
Right.
It's mental. And I would say that there's a huge transformation spiritually and mentally that happens during labor that I feel like is stolen from women when they go into a hospital and they're immediately put on like pain medication.
Yeah.
Because you are disconnecting your body, your mind from what is happening to you. You can't feel anything.
Right.
And like that's not the way God intended things to be.
Right.
And I fully believe that my whole philosophy, this is why I say I'm a hippie, is because I want to be as natural as possible in every aspect of my life.
Right.
I want to be doing exactly, I want my life to be lived exactly the way that God would have intended for things to be. Right. I don't want to mess with his design.
Sure.
Because I think he's smarter than the rest of us.
Yeah, I would hope so.
And like God designed women's bodies to do this perfectly. He perfectly designed our bodies for pregnancy and birth and for postpartum and raising babies, and men and women are different. So.
Yeah. Oh, careful now.
Yeah.
You get in trouble for saying that these days.
Men and women are different.
Yeah. But do you think like things like the fall of man and sin entering the world and all the corruption that came with that would have any effect on that, like affecting the natural processes and the way that God designed things to where there is problems and issues with even like childbirth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say like, so worldwide, I would honestly say that less than 10% of women actually need, like, are high risk and actually need emergency care.
Okay.
But that's less than 10%.
Right. I know it's small, but I think what they do is they make you fear.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be that percentage. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a small percentage, but for those people that lose children, it's the whole world to them, right? It's like it's like whenever we hear of things like we just heard about in Israel, all these many people and all those horrible things that's happening to them. That's like a global thing. Like, man. Yeah. But even then, you're like, I don't know them. I mean, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah.
But like, if one of my children died, that's only one person.
Yeah.
That's gonna impact me way more than thousands of people that I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though the number is way larger, you know?
Well, I would say for people that if they're worried about losing their children, they should be more worried about losing their children in a hospital than in a home birth, because midwives are with you for an hour every single time you have an appointment. You have way more appointments with the midwife than you do with a doctor.
Right.
People go to the hospital, they see a different doctor every time, and they get like 10 minutes.
Right.
You know, they'll check weight and they'll check the baby and they'll look for the heartbeat, and they don't explain anything to women on like how to give birth.
Yeah.
Well, a midwife is different. She sees you. She's with you every step of the way. She can tell when something's different. Like she also knows your baby's heartbeat very well because she listens to it every single time. So she knows that even if it's still within normal range, if it's a bit higher or lower, like that's something she's paying attention to.
Right.
So she knows your body and your baby more than a doctor in the hospital will. Right. And they're also very well trained on emergencies. They have medication just like all the other doctors for hemorrhaging. There's only, I would say, a handful of emergencies where they'll transfer you to a hospital, but they know way far in advance if that's something that's going to happen to you, and you're prepared for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can tell early on in the pregnancy if that's going to be a problem.
And they can tell early on in labor. Okay. Because they know you and the baby so well that they can tell, like, hey, like, this is outside of your range of normal. So I think it's a good idea to transfer. Okay. It's extremely rare for a certified or even nurse midwife to have a loss of an infant or mom in the home.
Okay. Now, do you think that most people think what you just said is not true because the fear tactics that come in from the medical community that wants you to spend your money with them?
It's propaganda.
Okay.
Women have been giving birth for thousands of years. If you're an evolutionist, it's millions of years.
Billions of years, right?
Yeah. And the problems with childbirth really started happening around the 1900s when the medical community realized that there was an opportunity for birth to be medicalized. And the earliest medical doctors that were opening up hospitals for women to go birth in had a huge propaganda war against midwives. And they even admitted, there's letters between like the people that were running the medical establishments at the time, because there was only a handful of hospitals and colleges that were training doctors in the United States in the 1900s. There was letters between them talking about how the midwives were having way better outcomes than they were, but like that they were getting in the way. Right. Because women were going to them and not the doctors.
Getting in the way of their pocketbook.
Yes. Yes. And they were getting in the way of their credibility. Yeah. Because they were having better outcomes than the doctors. And I'm not a feminist, but I definitely feel like there is some pride there. Of like,
well, and
these
back
women,
then,
these uneducated women are doing things better than we are, and we're the trained men.
Right. Well, back then, sexism was a huge thing.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That women weren't supposed to do anything other than make babies and make dinner.
Yeah.
So if these women are coming in and say, hey, we can deliver babies just as good as this PhD doctor, of course they're going to have some pride issues there, right? They're going to be like, well, how dare you, you know?
And honestly, this is what has led me into so many other beliefs, is because once you start looking at the man behind the curtain and you start digging into why things are the way that they are, you start to realize that everything is the way that it is for a reason, and it's been put like that on purpose. Right. And I wanted, like, there's no stone that I will leave unturned when I catch wind of something that is a little suspicious to me. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would just believe whatever they want.
Yeah.
And then just go with that. But you're saying you'll research it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I was wondering why in the Army are they wanting me to donate the cord blood for my baby? Like, let me look into that, and then I look and I realize that it's because of the stem cells. They want to use the stem cells for research.
Okay.
And
are you against that?
Well, I'm not against stem cell research as long as it's not from aborted fetuses.
Right, but like if it's from the healthy cord that comes off of your healthy daughter that's born, then you're okay with that, right?
I'm not against it in per se, but I would say that 100% of the blood that's in the placenta and the cord is the baby's blood. Mm-hmm. And it should not be cut from the baby because that's their blood.
So you don't think the cord should be cut ever?
No, I think that it needs to be cut after the blood has been fully drained from the placenta.
Okay. How long does that take?
It's called like delayed cord clamping. It's different for everybody, but it only takes a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would say I try to wait until I deliver the placenta and then I have the cord cut, and usually because by then the cord goes white and limp.
Right.
But if it's red and it's pulsating, it means that your baby's blood is still being put in your baby.
So the placenta is like giving the baby all the nutrients and blood and everything that's in there.
It's giving the baby oxygen.
Okay. Stem
cells. I honestly, there's a huge long list. I'm not going to go through all of it.
Yeah, I mean, but it is fascinating. Yeah. It makes you wonder, like, if that's... I mean, I know nothing about this, of course. I've never heard this before, but it'd be interesting to wonder, like, if a lot of the issues that kids have today might be because of that.
It is.
I mean, if they're cutting the cord too early and you're not getting all that vital stuff in the first few minutes of life outside the womb, it's like, wow.
The whole process is rushed.
Yeah.
It's all rushed. I can literally talk for years.
Which is good
because this is my chosen field.
That's what I was going to say. You're going into that yourself,
yeah.
So it's good that you're passionate and you know everything that you know. Not everything, but you're learning and you're gathering all that information.
And I would consider this a political issue.
Sure.
This is why I'm spending so much time talking about it, because
absolutely
there's these issues that I think that people don't realize are controlled by higher powers. Mm-hmm. Like the hospitals, the medical system as a whole, they never think about it like, okay, I'm pregnant now, I need to go to the hospital. That's the last place you want to be for delivering a healthy baby with a healthy pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Because all that means is they're giving you these interventions that are going to lead to more interventions that are going to lead to more money being in their pocketbooks.
Right.
And the system's rigged against women.
Yeah.
We actually, out of the top 50 developed countries, we are at the bottom of the list for healthy mother and baby rates. Mm-hmm. Like, we have the worst rates in the world out of all 50
United States does, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Out of all 50 top developed countries in the world. Wow.
Which is crazy because we're supposed to be the most advanced.
Yeah, but it's an illusion. Mm-hmm. The top countries are the ones that use midwives and promote home birth. Okay.
And you mean top as far as like infant survival rate and that kind of thing?
Mother and infant. I call them positive rates because it's not just survival, but it's also like long-term health of the mom and the baby afterwards. Like postpartum depression and anxiety is very uniquely an American and Canadian phenomenon.
Right.
It doesn't exist anywhere else.
Well,
it does, but
I
not
think anxiety
like
and depression are probably higher here anyway.
Yes.
Right. Pregnant or not pregnant or whatever. I mean, for men too, I think there's probably higher rates of that in our country than there is other places. You know? So I mean, there's probably a million reasons for that. Mm-hmm. Self-centeredness being a big part of it. We're kind of brought up to believe that we are the center of the universe and our happiness is the number one goal. And when life doesn't turn out the way we picture it in our fantasy mind, then we get sad and depressed. Oh, everything's against me. It's like, no. Yeah. Are you breathing? Yeah. Are you alive? Are yeah. So you got to work 2 jobs. So you're struggling to eat this week or whatever. I mean, you can always find somebody worse off than you.
Oh yeah.
Always.
And it's usually the people in the third world countries are way happier than we are.
That's what's crazy.
And they're living in mud huts and eating the food off the land that they grow.
Right. Suicide rates are higher here. I mean, it's like, why? We supposedly have everything, and so I always talk to my kids. You have all these these celebrities that have everything the world has to offer. All the money, all the fame, all the women, all the drugs, all the everything. Yeah. And they kill themselves.
Well, that's why the spiritual aspect of this is so important. Like, you can't not believe in God after seeing all of that. You know, because according to like an evolutionist point of view, we're supposed to be evolving like better as we go on. Progressing, right? But here in the United States, we have everything that we could ever need. And it's like mentally, our species here in the United States is like technically dying off. Yeah. Because our child birth rates are so low. Yeah. People are not having kids anymore, like mentally, they're not able to even put themselves in that position. Right. And I really do feel like this evolution should be debunked. I mean, it has been, but it should not be the mainstream belief. No. Because there's such a deep spiritual aspect behind everything. We have a moral compass. And when you have a lack of moral compass, you start seeing these problems that we have today, where people believe that their life is worthless. Yeah. They believe, even if they have everything they could ever want, which I feel like would be like the pinnacle of like an evolution goal. It is to have, from a humanistic standpoint, for sure. To have everything you could ever want. Right. To be at the peak of what your species is supposed to be. Right. And the person gets there and they kill themselves. There's definitely a spiritual aspect.
Well, it's that whole cliche term, God-shaped hole, right? So there's a God-shaped hole in all of us, but I mean, it sounds dumb, but it's true. Like, and these people, they spend their whole lives trying to fill that hole with everything the world has to offer, and it only gets you so far. Yeah. You know, but I've met lots of people that are atheists that will say they're happier than they've ever been, and they'll, you know, and I can't prove them otherwise. I mean, I can't disbelieve them. I mean, maybe they're right, but I think as a whole, like on a global scale, I think most people that don't have some form, and there have been studies to prove this, that most people don't have some form of spirituality in their lives, they say they're empty. They feel like what's the purpose, you know? So, it's a mess.
It is a mess, for sure.
We're kind of bouncing all around. This is is fun. This is really cool.
Well, we can take it back to music.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go back to. Well, let's just do a little bit more on music, and then we'll dig a little more into politics, and then because I know what we're talking about is very political anyway.
I like jumping around. It's good to have some lighter topics and then kind of slowly get into the heavier stuff. Yeah, for sure. So we've already talked about your favorite genre being what you call beach music, but that's not really that's more like modernized. You're not talking about the Beach Boys. I would say, in the Army I used to tell people like West Coast reggae because for a lot of people, especially in the South, reggae to them is like completely different. Okay. It's like another language of mumbly. I would say it's very like African. Right. Yeah. Is
that like more like dance hall? You ever heard that style of music?
I've never heard of it.
I guess that's where hip hop came from. Okay. But like reggae, I'm probably totally getting this wrong. There was a guy I knew who was a rapper, and he broke this all down for me because he was a huge fan of dance hall. But he was talking about how like reggae morphed into dance hall, which was more kind of like the music sounded reggae, but it was more kind of a speaking as opposed to a singing. Yeah. And then I guess dance hall morphed into like hip hop.
Yeah. I would say a good in-between example is like Shaggy.
Oh, I couldn't stand that guy.
That deep, low, like mumbly voice that he's got going on. Yeah. Imagine that, but like really leaning into that. Okay. And that's all that type of reggae.
So like him, it was Shabba Ranks was the other one. I remember when I was in high school. Like those kind of guys with that deep kind of voice, and it just wasn't, because to me reggae is always like Bob Marley. Like you think, what's reggae? Most people, they don't know anybody other than Bob Marley. Oh, Bob Marley's reggae. You know, it's like, but there's a million other singers and groups that are also reggae, you know, and then there's all the morphs and everything else you got coming in. So
that's why in the Army I would always tell people I listen to like West Coast beach reggae. Okay. Because it's very different than like Jamaican reggae. Right. It's a very different vibe.
So mention some other groups that you would consider that genre. You mentioned Revolution. What I would listen to? Well, just as far as like what you just described, that kind of music, what you would call West Coast reggae.
I would say Iration.
Okay.
And Stick Figure.
Okay.
Iration, actually, I wrote it down. They just came out with a new album called Day Tripping, and it's so good.
Really?
Yes.
Like it's like brand new?
They just came out with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think about like this week or last. But,
well, that's impressive because usually a lot of bands that we like, or most of their new stuff, just it doesn't measure up. Mm-hmm. So whenever they release something new and you're like, oh, this is like good.
I've listened to almost the whole album and like I keep listening to it like top to bottom so I don't get to the bottom.
Oh, okay.
But it's really good. That one of the songs that I really connected to right now on that one is called California Dreams, and it's talking about when they're first getting started and they're broke and they're living in California and nothing's free,
right.
And they're trying to make it, and you know they finally did make it.
Yeah.
And it's just talking about like the California dream, the West Coast state of mind of you just got to keep going,
right?
Because there's no other option here.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. There's no other option here.
Okay. And that was Iration or Stick Figure?
That's Iration. Okay. I really like Stick Figure, and then my favorite song I think from them is called Edge of the Ocean, which is pretty new.
Okay.
It's just like more mellow. I would say their music in general is a lot more mellow than some of the other ones. And then like Dirty Heads, my favorite song from their more recent music is called Rescue Me. Most of my favorite music right now is all about like California.
Okay. Because you're homesick probably and you like to listen to that stuff. I've
been homesick, but so there's something about Dirty Heads where their music I feel like has really fallen in line with where my life has been.
Okay.
Even though they're such a secular band, Rescue Me is about they're on tour and the song they're only gone for 2 months and it's raining and they're missing home.
Oh, funny.
I've been gone for like 5 years, but the way that they're describing being homesick from California, it's like I was crying when I went to their concert and they sang that song. It just
nice.
Like it really touched me.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Those are the best bands sometimes, are the ones that connect with you on a personal level.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of times you might show that song to someone else, say, who's not you and doesn't understand living in California and moving away.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, that's a pretty cool song. You're like, no, you don't understand. It's the greatest song of all time.
Yeah.
It's just, it's making me cry. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. You know?
I feel like the Californians that move away and don't want to come back are not my people.
Yeah.
They're so not me.
Yeah.
I've met actually quite a few Californians that are just as homesick as I am. They're like, man, this place sucks.
Yeah.
North Carolina and Washington, everywhere else.
Yeah. I wonder if a big part of that, I mean, this is kind of a side thing, but I know we've looked at leaving California multiple times.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I mean, there's I'm sure you'd agree there's a lot of reasons to do it.
Oh yeah.
But
I can see all the reasons.
Sure, but it's
then when you go,
I know, and that's what's hard. We were looking at like Tennessee for a while. We were going around with a real estate agent there. We were looking at properties, the whole deal.
Yeah.
But we spent a weekend in Orlando in July, and because Bethany had like a Color Street conference there, just me and her went.
Okay.
And it was brutal. The weather, it was hot. I mean, I've had hot. Like we get the dry heat here, and we've had, we get a couple triple digit days every year and stuff. But that humidity was something I was not prepared for. And I was like, and North Carolina is the same. It's just like I can imagine it's probably like shock for you to grow up here and then go somewhere like that. Be like, oh my gosh, I thought I knew what heat was. This is on a whole new level. So for us, that was, for me, I should say, it was more me than Bethany, but I was like, I don't know if I can live in Tennessee because it's like this 3 to 4 months out of the year. I don't know if I can handle that.
You can't leave your house in the summer.
Right.
And then in the winter, you can't really leave your house because it's cold.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we get spoiled growing up here because it's like, we're like, it's pretty much 75 degrees all year round, in the winter. We might get down, and the nighttime temperature is like 30 and 40.
Oh, man.
But like there's places, like I got friends in Idaho and Montana where they're like, it's 40 below in the wintertime.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Do you know how frustrating it is and ridiculous when we'll call family here and they'll be like, oh, like it's so cold.
Yeah.
And it's like 60 degrees.
Yeah.
And then I'm in North Carolina in the Army wearing, for PT in the morning, like our exercise, shorts and a t-shirt, and it's 33 degrees.
Woo!
Because you have to have 32 degree weather to be able to wear pants.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's...
I'm like, oh, yeah, you think it's cold?
Yeah.
You think it's cold?
Like, it's 55
degrees?
out here. I almost had to put on a hoodie.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but see, that's what we're used to. And I think it depends on where you grow up. Because the people that grew up in Montana, they're like, this is just what winter is. I'm used to this. This is normal,
I
you know?
always joke about how I'm a cactus, and I feel like I've been put in a really cold, like Antarctica or something. I just don't belong.
Right.
I require a very certain amount of sunlight.
Okay.
And soil and nourishment, and I don't get that anywhere but here.
Right.
And
does it ever get too hot? Or are you the kind of person who likes it hotter the better, or does it ever get to the point where you're like, oh, this is too hot, I hate this?
You know, I'm not the kind of person that likes to bundle up. I like to wear long sleeves and sweaters.
Okay.
But I like fall weather, I think, the most. Mm-hmm. But and I know that doesn't happen here.
Not like it does other places.
I mean, nobody's ever going to be fully comfortable and happy with the way things are, I think, when it comes to where they live, because people that live in all 4 seasons will have seasons that they don't enjoy. Right. And that's fine. Yeah. And then out here, I remember being sad because we never had seasons.
Yeah, me too. I felt the same way, and I've always wanted that. Like growing up, and I always told Bethany when we were younger, I was like, oh man. And probably even before I met her, I used to think this, when I get married someday and have kids, I want to go somewhere where I want my kids to grow up where there's 4 seasons. And we never did that, obviously. I mean, all our kids are almost, our youngest is 13 right now, so he's only got 5 more years left till he's an adult. But we just never did it. And part of me regrets that, but then other part of me is like, maybe not. Maybe it was the best thing for us to stay here, But because I think the reason why, like, growing up here, and like when I go to Orlando, I freak out, is because I'm not used to it, right? But like if my kids grew up in a place where they had those 4 seasons, they wouldn't be that way. Yeah. They could pretty much go anywhere in the country and be like, oh yeah, this is cold. Oh yeah, this is warm. Not like, it's hot. I'm gonna die out here. So yeah, but.
I enjoyed being away from California for a couple years, but then after a while of like having kids, you realize how important family really is.
Well, that too.
And also just like how important the familiarity of home is. It's not even really necessarily my family that I miss, but this is my comfort zone. Even like in Washington, I hate going to the playground and I hate talking to other parents, and I just feel this anxiety.
Oh, really?
Like, I don't want to be like, I'm not comfortable here.
Okay. Because they're new people you don't know?
I don't even know. It's just something inside of me where it's like, I don't even want to leave my house. I just feel so out of place.
Now, when you're here, though, like, do you feel that way? Like, if you go to a concert and you're around people you don't know, do you feel that way around them, too?
Fully opposite.
So you're like, oh, these are California people, whether I know them or not.
I honestly can't even say. It's just, there's something inside of me where I feel so comfortable and I feel so happy and at peace where I'm able to be like fully who I'm supposed to be. Okay. And I feel like, and like I was saying, this is probably not a healthy way to have like my identity, but I feel so connected to home, of this place being my home. Right. I'm who I am here. Right. This is, I feel like, the way I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And does your husband feel the same way? Does he? Because he grew up in the area too, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay.
He misses home. He really loves his job at Boeing. He's an engineer and he's got a lot of problems to solve, and he's working with big airplanes every day. It makes him happy. Yeah. But the pull of home has been really, I think, catching up to him too, especially with his brother passing. Yeah. His mom's alone now, so like we really do feel like this is where we're supposed to be. Okay. Yeah. And actually, this is a really great place to homeschool kids.
It is. For now.
Yeah.
I think if Newsom has his way, but I think the cool thing about California, even though it's a very liberal state, there's a lot of conservative Christians here. And a lot of them are homeschooling, especially, Bethany and I had, because we've homeschooled since Laura was, she did kindergarten and first grade in public school, and then Aiden did kindergarten public school, and after that it's been homeschool. Our other 2 kids have been homeschooled all the way.
It's a way to do it.
But we had, when everything was happening with COVID and with supposed forced vaccinations and all this stuff that was happening, we had people calling us, people that aren't even Christians. And they're just like, hey, we're looking into homeschooling now. Can you tell us how to do that? Like, can you give us some pros and cons? Like, tell us what it's been like for you. And so that was a whole new ballgame for us. Because usually it's Christian parents are like, I don't want public schools forcing evolution and not to mention all the social crap that happens in public schools and everything else, you know. But now when COVID happened, it was like a whole different thing to where they're like, no, I'm not forcing my kid to wear a mask. I'm not forcing my kid to get a vaccine that we don't even know about and all this stuff, you know. So it was just a whole new thing. So, I mean, I think the homeschooling community in this area has just multiplied over the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, I think a lot of people associate homeschool with Christians, but it's so much more diverse than that. I have this theory of this is like one of the conspiracies I think that I get into of there's been this forced disconnection from the family unit here in the West, where it seems like purposefully there's been systems that were slowly put in place to disconnect families from one another.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah, like I'm not even a believer in the nuclear family because I think that we need to have intergenerational families. Okay. I believe that we're supposed
Which is the nuclear family, but you're just saying...
Like, I'm saying, like...
Grandparents and all of that should be involved? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, like, the way that things should be is the way in the Old Testament how there would be, like, a family property that people would live on. Yeah. And it, like, people would work together. It was, like, a big, like, I know compound is a scary word.
I know, but it's awesome.
That's the way that things have always been.
Yeah, and they had a big, long table in the middle of the area, and they'd all meet there for dinner. It's like, I love it.
People, they didn't have villages. They had families.
Right.
And that's the way that things should be. So, like, I don't believe in the 50s nuclear family. I think that was actually really disconnecting for women and for families.
In what way? Like, can you explain that?
Well, it's the man working outside of the home, whereas I think the last few thousands of years, families worked together on, like, family properties, and they had businesses together. Like, even in more residential, like, city areas, people would live above their shops. Yeah. There would be, like, a cobbler. And the family would live in the same building that they cobbled shoes in. Yeah. And they worked together. It was not, like...
Yeah. You still see that in some big cities. Like, there'll be restaurants. Like, if you're in New York or something, or Chicago, there'll be, like, a restaurant. Yeah. And then the family that owns the restaurant lives in the apartment above the restaurant. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that people have a lot of family issues here in the West. Like, families just don't get along. And I don't think that's necessarily normal. I think that's from the forced disconnection. Okay. There's been forced family generational issues that I think have stemmed from outside things, that, like, social pressures that will be embedded into the older generations and then passed down to the younger, and then there's tensions between them. Sure. Because they're not living around each other, they're so separate. There's a psychology, I guess, theory, it's called, like, attachment theory, where your attachment to your parents in the first 3 years of life is the most crucial for creating neural pathways in the brain. And you carry that with you your whole life. And, like, the way that you interact with other people is based off of the first 3 years of your life.
Isn't that nuts? But it makes such sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because that's crucial development years, you know.
And this really started happening after the 1900s when it starts with birth. I think it starts with the relationship between a mother and a baby. And it also starts with the relationship between a husband and her wife. Yeah. And I feel like we saw the most disconnection. Well, we're seeing it now, but we really started seeing it in the 50s. Right. That's when feminism really took off because people realized how unhappy they were. Right.
So you say that your problem with the nuclear family is more the idea of the father leaving the home to work because now he's not around his wife and children all the time. He's just coming home who knows when. They hardly ever see him. Yeah. Because most people would have a different problem with the nuclear. When some people say I have a problem with the nuclear family, they would say, like, oh, I don't think that, you know, the mom should be raising the kids, and I don't think that the dad should be the only one working, and, you know, we need to have this dual income and it should be equal and all that. You're not saying all that. You're just...
I am saying that I think that the way that God designed the family was we were supposed to be outdoors. We were supposed to be very connected with one another. Adam and Eve were made to do work together. Like, Eve was made to be Adam's helper. Right. And I really do believe that we're supposed to be doing physical labor with one another as a family on some land.
That'd be healthier.
Yeah, it's a lot healthier, I think. And it's obviously not everybody can do something like that, but people have, for thousands of years, people have lived very simple lives together as a family, doing chores together, like living life. And it's those, like what we were talking about, it was always the wealthier people that had the mental health issues. And they can have everything that they've ever wanted. And they were the ones that had more problems.
Yet people still strive for that. That's still what's called the American dream, right?
Yeah.
To get all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, time and time again, we see that that's not fulfilling.
Yeah, so I would say it's not necessarily that I have an issue with the nuclear family. I just don't think that that's ideal, and I think that a lot of Christian conservatives value the nuclear family as like the pinnacle of what things are supposed to be. But the reality is, nobody was happy then either. Right. It was things were better before then. Right,
but you would see what they're doing now with the deconstruction of the nuclear family. They're not going back to what you're talking about. What they're creating by deconstructing it is far worse than, I would say, than what the nuclear family is. I'm with you. You go back before that, and that's probably better, right?
Well, if you see, people are so disillusioned with the way things have been for so long. You see this huge push in millennials to go start a homestead. They're trying to get back to the way things are supposed to be.
Isn't that funny?
I don't think it's the nuclear family. I think that was a stepping stone into what we have today. Okay. I think it was intentional. Yeah. But I don't think that people are supposed to be living, you know, in that way where they're gone from one another. The mom has like all of the responsibilities of the home. I think all the women in the family should be taking care of each other.
Well, it's like the Bible says that the older women are to teach the younger women, and that, you know, that's supposed to be and that's something we've lost too, right? Like even back, not that long, maybe a couple generations before me. I mean, you had this whole idea where you think things like family recipes, like, I learned how to make this from my grandma, and we used to have, on weekends, we would all bake and cook and all this stuff. And there's still families I know that still do that kind of stuff. Like all the women in the family get together on, like, say, a Sunday afternoon after church, and they make tortillas or make whatever, right? And it's this bond and this family unit, and I think that's awesome.
Well, I
love that.
I think the family culture is really important. When you take away like the core of what a family is, you're taking away the traditions, the feeling of home, that these people are your home. And I think that there's no coincidence that the elderly here are treated so poorly when babies are treated so poorly here. Parents drop their kids off in daycare and they'll leave them there for years. And then the kids are going to government school. I went to government school, which is people call public school. The government's raising your children.
Did you go to public school
my whole life?
Even what high school did you go to?
I went to Getty.
You did?
I did.
All 4 years?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yep. I did varsity swim and I did water polo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember your mom used to post pictures from your swim meets and stuff. Okay.
So I think there's a direct correlation to the disconnection of the family starting as babies. Children are not being raised by their parents. Yeah. They're just not. And moms and dads, it's a responsibility. The father is the head of the house. Yeah. He should be spiritually leading the family. Yep. And here in California, it's hard because everything's dual income, and I think that's a direct result of feminism making women go to the workplace. They feel like they have to contribute, and now everybody has dual income, and now everybody has dual income prices. Yes. And dual income taxing.
Yeah. And then nobody ever sees their kids anymore. Everybody's working way too much, and it's all destroyed.
Yep. So there's a reason why so many elderly people get pushed into elder care homes. In other cultures, that's not the way things are. Right. The parents raise their kids, they have a strong connection their whole life, and then the kids take care of their parents when they die. Yeah.
That's the way I believe the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when
You're not supposed to believe that. You're too young.
Well, then I know, right?
Your generation doesn't believe that kind of stuff.
No, I'm not like the other girls.
I can tell. Yeah, that's awesome, because I feel the same way, because I take that verse where it says honor your father and mother. I think that's what it means. I think they raised you, they gave you everything you needed when you couldn't support yourself, and your parents get to an age where they can't support themselves anymore.
Now, the Bible also says parents do not provoke your children to anger.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the issue that I think there's something about the early 2000s, like 90s church and the type of parenting styles that they were promoting that's so toxic and unbiblical.
Yeah. Totally.
I think respect is earned, and that the moment a child is born, they should not be looked at as your property that you can do whatever you want with. I think that they are a gift from God, that God has entrusted you to raise his children, and that child needs to be treated with love and respect. Sure. And I think that it goes both ways.
But do you think there should be rules at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that there's healthy boundaries that need to be set, and as the parents, like, it's our job to to not let our children, like, obviously hit one another. Sure. But I also don't think that parents should be hitting their children.
Okay.
And that's,
you're not a spanker?
No.
Okay.
My parents, I just call it what it is. It's hitting. They hit me, like, every single day of my whole life. Right. Until I moved, almost. And I have
you don't think that was beneficial?
I have a very poor relationship with them. Okay. Well, I have in the past. Things have gotten a lot better with my mom. The last few years, like, becoming an adult, I think that she's been really open to working through things with me, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having babies at the same time, you know, that's kind of...
It's very strange.
That's probably pretty weird, but kind of cool at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, you guys probably bond in a whole new way now.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm grateful because I've seen a really great change in her of being a parent. Like, she's definitely treats my little sister, I think, in a way that is a lot more helpful to her. And, like, biblically, we're supposed to be shepherding our children. Right. And I think that a lot of parenting is disguised. I think a lot of parenting modern times is manipulation disguised as parenting. Right. Especially because we're so disconnected from our parents right away.
Meaning you think that the parents are doing what they're doing for their own personal gain in some way?
I think we're born sinners, and that I think it's kind of a lie when people say that your parents do their best, because we're sinners. Yeah. We're selfish beings. Right. I already know, like, I've probably sinned against my children, and they're probably going to be telling me that I was a terrible parent when when they're adults. And
so, what do you say to people? And I've had people even on the show before that have said that their parents believed in spanking, not abuse. Not what we would call abuse, not like hitting in the face, or we're just talking about, like, you know, on the butt, you know, the fatty part or whatever, and actual spanking in a proper way, what I would call a proper way. We never spanked our kids either, but I'm not against it. Anyway, that's a different issue. But, like, when people like that will tell me, now that they're adults, that they are so thankful that their parents spanked them when they were little, because they think that taught them respect, it taught them to follow the rules, it taught them to stay out of danger. You know, I mean, growing up, I can only remember a few times that I was spanked as a kid. My parents they weren't against it, but they didn't really do it often. Yeah. But the times that they did, I remember. Like, one was I was running into the street, right? And my mom she wanted to make sure I never did that again. Yeah. Why? Because she was scared to death that she thought to herself, she could have lost me that day. If a car had been coming by, I would have been smashed. Yeah. You know, and that's...
I totally understand, and I think that every parenting situation is different, but I also feel like, were your parents generally angry people, would you say?
No.
Okay.
Not really, but see, that's why when I say proper spanking, I don't think anger is involved. Yeah. I don't think when the Bible talks about spare the rod, that whole deal, I don't think it means anger, and I think even with yelling at our kids, right, when we're in the heat of it, the best thing a parent can do, I think, is to just say, okay, I want you to go stand over there. Yeah. I will come talk to you when I'm ready. Then that parent needs to go in their bedroom, get on their knees and pray. Yeah. And calm down, and then go administer whatever discipline is necessary for the learning of the child. It should never be out of anger.
There's a verse that says to train up your child in the way that they should go, that way that when they grow old, they will not depart from it. Yep. And I think that maybe that's just the way that I grew up. I didn't get a lot of explanation, I think, for things, and I would say a lot of other kids that I knew that were spanked a lot, they would get a spanking, and then their parents would be like, well, it's because you did this. Right. But we're supposed to be training our children, like explaining like this is the way that the world works.
Yeah, it's for teaching.
Yes, you're supposed to teach your child. You're not just supposed to say, I'm the parent and this is the way things are, and because I said so.
Right.
I think that is the worst cop-out.
Yeah.
Just to say, because I said so.
But it's funny, though, because when my parents used to say that when I was younger, I used to hate that.
It's because it's not the way it should be.
I know, but I kind of get it now because, like, with my kids, like, I can answer all their questions forever.
Yeah.
And I start to realize that they don't really want to know and understand. They're just trying to find some loophole to get out of their grounding or whatever it is, you know? And it's like, no. And I've said it before. I've gotten to the point like, just because I said so, okay? Just because I said so. I'm done arguing with you. I'm done sitting here trying to explain it to you because you obviously aren't interested in the explanation anyway. Yeah. You're just trying to find some way to get out of your punishment, you know?
I mean, I think I should probably say, because I know my mom's going to listen to this, that I love my parents. I don't really have a relationship with my dad right now for other reasons, but I love my parents, and I know that, like, they're sinners, and they made it very clear to me that we're all sinners in need of Jesus, and that's the most important thing.
Sure.
And I really do think that the experiences that I had growing up that were really traumatic for me pushed me to have a relationship with Jesus because I needed him.
Okay. So you see, like, the silver lining.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, like, there's so many great things that my parents did that I'll always remember and appreciate. My dad went out of his way to make sure that I knew why I believed things that I believed. He always wanted me to dig in to
that's the way he is.
Yeah.
I've had lots of pretty deep conversations with him.
Yeah.
So.
And that's something awesome that he did great. And my mom was always there for me anytime I needed her. If I had sporting events, she was there. Yeah. So I had a very present mom, even though like towards the end, like she wasn't as involved in my school stuff when I was little. She was really involved in like field trips and things.
Right.
Life changes.
Yeah.
So you can't always be there 100% of the time, but I do feel like I got a lot more effort from my parents than some other people got from theirs. And I always really appreciated that.
Yeah.
But it's, we are all sinners. And we all have things that are that plague us, and maybe we don't even realize it, but the important part at the end of the day is to always be willing to say that you're sorry and that that you need help from God.
Yeah.
Because if you don't admit that you are a sinner in need of saving, then you're not in need of a savior.
Right.
And I know that I am.
Right. It's like that cliche thing people say. It's not I guess not cliche because Jesus said it, but people use it and say it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. Yeah. And when I talk to people that are atheists, and that some of the people that I was talking about a little while ago that would say, "Oh no, everything is going great. Yeah. I don't need God. I don't need your God. Yeah. I got everything I need." I think, well, you don't realize your sickness. You still have the same sickness I do, which is sin nature and everything, but you just don't realize that you have that because you view those things as not bad. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is just what I like to do. And you can't really say anything to somebody like that because the Lord has to open their hearts to the fact, first of all, that they need him. Yeah. Right. That's the place we all have to come to in that journey. But but before we leave this real quick, I just want to get your take on, like, as far as when I'm talking about like spanking in a way that's not angry. Yeah. There's no hatred or violence really. I mean, I guess some people call that violent. Are you against all of that completely? Like, I mean, I know you don't do that in your family, but if let's say you have a friend who does that, do you try to talk them out of that form of punishment, or? We
actually do have some friends that are considering doing that. They only have like a 1-year-old right now. Okay. But like I had a good conversation with a friend of mine about it, and I have no judgment. Like, I fully respect like the way that they'll do things because that's the way that they grew up, and they have a great relationship with their parents. But also, this friend was saying that like they've always had a good relationship with their parents. They can remember, like, not even on one hand how many times that their parents spanked them. Right. And I can't say the same thing for myself. Sure. And it's like this. I think this goes back to saying that there's a better way to do things, and when you know better, you do better. And I dive really heavily into early childhood development and the attachment theory of like what makes a child's brain the way that it is. They're not developed. They have no emotional regulation, and when they are not in their reasoning side of the brain, their brain literally cannot even come into the rational part of the side of their brain. They're fully emotional beings.
Until what age, usually?
So the first 3 years are the most, like, that toddler stage where you cannot talk to a toddler in the middle of an emotional breakdown.
Right.
It's impossible.
Oh, yeah.
Like, biologically, God has set up their brain to be this way, where they're supposed to get all of their regulation from us. There's a lot of biological process that goes into it. Like, literally skin to skin with a baby will just stop them from crying sometimes.
Right.
Because they need the regulation, the peace,
the heartbeat,
and the calm.
and the whole,
Yeah, they don't have the brain development to even understand. And I think parents expect way too much out of small children that are not developmentally ready.
Right. Like, because you can't reason with them at that age necessarily
No.
and explain to them. But, like, so do you think, like, let's say it's a 2-year-old and they do something they're not supposed to. And every time they do that thing they're not supposed to, they get a swat on the butt. You don't think that they're developed enough to understand this equals this. If I do this, I get that pain. So I'm going to stop doing this kind of a thing? Or do you don't think they can get that until they're over 3?
I don't think they associate that. They don't have control. They don't have self-control. In fact, like, I don't think men have their self-control, like, fully developed until they're, like, 25 years old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So imagine a 2-year-old. They don't have the self-control. And in their brain, they see, like, their parent hits them. And then all they see is, like, they were, trying to explore life or trying to do something that they thought was interesting or fun.
Right.
And then all of a sudden their parent is hitting them. And that's the person that they're supposed to be getting their emotional regulation from.
Right.
Can you imagine how confusing that would be?
Sure.
I really respect the way that God has biologically designed us, and I really want to understand it as much as possible. And I'm sure maybe I'm wrong. There's probably plenty of things I'm wrong about. This might be one of them. But to the best of my knowledge, like, for the first 3 years of life, the only thing that should be focused on is teaching your child how to emotionally regulate themselves, so that they can have independence and be able to do things with self-control on their own.
Yeah, because if you fast forward to what's happening with a lot of the teenagers today, that's what they don't know how to do. They don't know what to do with their emotions. That's why all of them. It's rare that we see kids are shooting up schools and they're getting in fights and they're turning to drugs and alcohol and all this kind of stuff. That's really what's happening. They're having these emotions. They don't know what to do about it.
Every single person that is in that position has a terrible relationship with their parents. They come from broken families. They come from places where they had absolutely no attachment or good regulation from a caregiver. Yeah,
and I would agree. I think that's the number one problem today, I think, is. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. It's either the dual income thing, like we talked about. It's just parents that are absent because they're addicted to their electronics or whatever. The kids are all addicted to electronics. You see them walking around with the phones all the time. And it's just like, and we fall into that because, like, with Aiden and Laura, we were like, no phone. When they both turned 18, they got their first phone when they were 18,
oh, man,
right?
That's so rough.
Right? And all their friends are like,
being 11 years old, everyone's getting a phone. I was in junior high, and I was like, this is the worst.
Yeah, right? Because you feel left out. Yeah. But what I would always tell them, and Laura especially, I tell Laura, she said, well, how come so-and-so has a phone and I don't? I said, well, because I love you more than their parents love them. That's pretty much what the answer to that is,
Yeah.
But I mean, but now, like, I think we've just gotten lazy because we're older and we just don't, like, we can't keep. I'm not making an excuse, but I look at, like,
babies have iPads now.
I know, and it's gross.
I'm telling you, parents do not spend time with their children today.
Right. I know.
Most parents.
I know.
They're this, especially in places like this where it's expensive and dual income. The kids in daycare from like 6 weeks old until they're much older. Their parent is gone from 9 to 5.
Right.
They have a few hours at the end of the day to spend with their parent.
Yeah.
Their parent's cooking or running errands.
Yeah.
Or doing things around the house. That kid is watching TV.
Yeah.
They're getting no time with their parent. And they're going to bed and they're waking up in the morning. The same thing.
Do it all over again, yeah.
I saw a stat. It was like the average American parent actually only spends about 30 minutes of quality time with their child every single day. 30 minutes.
That's horrible.
People are not raising their children today.
I know.
And I know that everything with motherhood is always very controversial. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what the topic is.
Right.
Parenting in general, like I'm a proud supporter. I can say that breastfeeding is the best thing for your baby.
Oh yeah.
It's a scientific fact.
Yeah. It's almost like God designed it that way or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you'll have parents just hearing that breast is best, they'll say that you're mom shaming them.
Yeah.
And that's not true, because shame is something that you feel when you feel like you're doing something wrong and you're just doing something wrong.
Right.
And if it's within your control to change, then you can change it and you don't have to feel shame.
Right.
But if it's outside of your control, then you shouldn't be feeling shame, because you are actually just doing your best.
Sure.
And I really hate when people say that you're mom shaming just for saying a fact.
Right. Well, it's because people don't like to be judged. Right?
And not everything's a personal attack.
I know, but that people, they feel like it is. Like I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, I've had people tell me, Ryan, we just want to be able to do this without feeling like you're judging us. And I'm like, okay, so hang on a second, because this is the other Christians, right? And I'm like, well, first of all, the Bible's pretty clear we are to judge other Christians. Mm-hmm. I know people don't like to hear that.
We're not supposed to say if they're going to heaven or hell, but we're supposed to call them out.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm thinking about this person. I'm like, okay, so here's the question I have for you. If your question to yourself should be, what I'm doing, is it wrong?
Yeah.
Not, I don't want Ryan to make me feel judged by it. Maybe you should be judged by that if what you're doing is wrong. Yeah. If what you're doing is totally fine, and I'm judging you for doing something that's not wrong, then I'm in the wrong. I shouldn't be doing that. But that's not usually what it is, right? It's usually people like, how dare you make me feel bad for doing the bad thing that I'm doing? Yeah. We're like little kids when it comes to that stuff. It's not
even necessarily bad things. If you do something differently than them, and you're saying like, oh, this is why I do it, how dare you shame me for this thing? I'm like, well, I have actually just done a lot of research, and this is a decision I made for myself and my family. Right. And if you are doing the same and you feel good about your decision, there should be no shame there. Yeah. Like if you make a decision, you should be able to feel confident in it and good enough. And if you don't, get creative, find a different way to do it.
But I think ultimately people want to do what they want to do. Yeah. And they want everybody to leave them alone. Yeah. That's ultimately what I'm not like that. I'm like, no, I want to know the right way to do something. Yeah. Even if it means I've been doing it wrong my whole life. Mm-hmm. But I find that most people aren't like that. You know, they'd rather just, instead of being wrong, they'd rather go down that wrong road and just stop judging me. Just don't talk to me. Just leave me alone.
Well, and then like, this is something my whole family has been like this. Is they always go, oh, I wish I knew this and I would have changed this way. Mm-hmm. No, you wouldn't. Mm-hmm. They would not do that. Right. They'll know that that there's different ways to do things. Right. And then they'll get there at the end of it and be like, oh, like I wish I could have done this differently. Yeah. That's no way to live.
Yeah, now you can't go back. Now it's over and done, right?
Especially like we're living in the age of information. Right. You can get a million different takes on whatever you want.
But you gotta want to.
Yeah, you gotta want to make the change. Right. And there's so many ways to get creative now. There's so many families that are trying to make things work, parenting differently. Like for the breastfeeding topic, I donate my extra breast milk.
Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, there's a local birth center in my area, and they give their breast milk to moms that are having trouble producing. Okay. And lactation consultants are usually covered by insurance. Mm-hmm. And I would say that anybody that's struggling with something like breastfeeding, a lactation consultant will help you. Yeah. And it's almost 100% not actually a supply issue. It's usually something else, like a tongue or lip tie, or like with the interventions in the hospital, like the inductions and stuff will cause breastfeeding issues. Right. Like with milk supply. So yeah. But
around here when Laura was little, we were Bethany was part of the La Leche League.
Oh, nice.
Which, if you speak Spanish, that's the milk league. Right?
They've done such great work in this country.
Yeah. Oh, you know that company?
Yeah.
Oh, they're all throughout the country?
Yes, it's an organization that helps breastfeeding moms.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because, and again, I'm not going to say that formula is always wrong, because like sometimes
People adopt babies. They need formula.
Exactly. But I do have an issue. I'm with you, and I do have an issue with women that just decide, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether it's cosmetic, whether it's like, well, I don't want, that's going to make my boobs look bad or something as I get older. It's like, that's what you're supposed to do with them. Like, that's the whole purpose of them.
This is every time something comes up, I go back to, how did God design our bodies?
Right.
He's smarter than you.
Right.
He knows what's best.
Yeah.
He designed your body perfectly to be able to do this thing.
Right.
You should be doing this thing, and if there's a problem, there are literally people that have jobs that can help you, and most of them are covered by insurance.
Yeah.
Insurance covers lactation consultants.
Yeah.
And also, breastfeeding is free.
Yes.
It's
and convenient.
Free. It's free and convenient.
Yes. Like when, because we Bethany breastfed.
You breastfed your kids.
Yes, I helped. No, but like we breastfed all except Aiden.
Yeah.
And that's only because he had, I don't know if you remember this, you're probably so little, but he had open heart surgery when he was young.
Wow.
Right? And because he was born with a heart defect, and then he had another surgery when he was like 15. But anyway, so after that surgery, they ended up, I guess it's pretty common when you're going in that area with such a small body that they ended up hitting something or whatever. I don't know all the technical stuff, but it was something that had to do with processing of fats. So after they did that, he wasn't able to process breast milk anymore. So we had to go to this special formula that was way expensive. Thank God that we had insurance that covered it, because it was like, I remember when I saw how much it was per thing, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But he was on that the rest. Bethany was not able to breastfeed after that. And it was hard for her because she saw that as a big bonding thing.
It's the attachment.
Totally. But we really had no other choice, because if she just kept trying to breastfeed him, he's not going to be getting all the nutrients he needs, and he's not going to be he's going to be malnourished. So I get it, and I understand, but back to the convenience thing, like even when Laura was little, it was like she wake up in the middle of the night, Bethany get her up, just come bring her into bed, lay down, Bethany fall asleep while Laura nursed, and there it was. Like,
we're one of the only countries that doesn't bed share. Right. And the country like Japan, they like fully bed share, and they have way better infant survival rates at night.
So we brought similar things up a few times now. Do you think that all of that is selfishness? Like when we say we don't bed share, we don't want to breastfeed, we don't want to do this, we want to put our kids in daycare. Do you think all that comes from a selfishness of the parents saying, I got my stuff that I want to do, and this kid's inconveniencing me? I
used to feel like a little bit of anger and frustration, because I'm like, why would you do things this way if you know there's a better way? Because most people know all the options, and that like there's certain things that are better than others, and they're not willing to put in the work to do it, or they're not willing to reach out to people. Like, not even to reach out when they really need help. They just want to do whatever is easy right in front of them, convenient to do. Right. Like, oh, my milk supply is low. Instead of going to lactation consultant, I'll just buy formula because it's at the grocery store where I'm at. Right. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's laziness.
It is. But then I realized after a while of getting frustrated, there's an entire set of systems that are designed for this, to create the disconnection.
What do you mean?
Well, like I was saying earlier, the hospitals.
Oh, like...
It's from the moment the baby is born, even during pregnancy, and especially the postpartum after women give birth, they have no help. We're the worst country when it comes to maternity leave. Other countries, like, I know they pay more taxes and stuff, but this is like the one thing where I'm like, if you're a woman in the workplace, you need to have like 6 months minimum off for your baby. Minimum. And like for most of the world, that is like the minimum. Right. And because
that's important time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great book that I read called The First 40 Days, and it's a collection of basically traditions from ancient cultures and even modern cultures all over the world that have had the same practices for taking care of moms after they give birth. And it's all of the women in the family after a woman gives birth come over, and they take care of the cooking, and they'll give the mom broths and warming foods, and they take care of the cleaning. All the mom has to do is lay down, rest, and feed her baby, be connected to her baby. Right. they take care of everything else.
That's awesome.
And that's the way I think that God designed femininity to actually be.
Right.
For women to be there for one another. That's just the way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And it's just not that way here. There are so many expectations culturally here in the U.S. that are just the opposite of what God designed.
Yeah.
And the systems are set up that way. I like I was saying, I do believe in like the conspiracy that there are a set of powers that be that are determining the way that our culture is supposed to be run, because they want to usher in a one world government.
Right.
And it starts with division among a strong country like the United States.
Oh, we're doing great at division right now.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And we wouldn't be so divided if people actually had compassion and love for one another.
Right.
But the system is set up to pit us against each other, even families against each other.
Right.
When you lose the family, the cultural connection within a family, who that family is, like that's supposed to be their identity, is I'm from this family.
Yeah.
When you lose that and everyone's so disconnected, everyone's on their own.
Right.
I have very different opinions from people in my family. And I can still hear what they have to say. I don't get emotional about it because I'm confident in my decisions.
Right.
But I have a lot of family members.
Because you're educated in your decisions.
Yeah.
That's the difference. You know why you believe what you believe because you looked into it and you have reasons, right? Yeah. Most people don't have that.
Yeah.
They just say, well, I just believe this. And then you start to ask questions. Then they get all mad at you.
They get very upset. They take things so personally. And I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to point my finger at them. That's just the way that you feel. Like, if that's the way that you feel, that's the way you feel. But you can't look at a single decision that I've made and tell me anything about it and that I'm doing something wrong, and I would never feel bad.
Right.
Like, if you told me that I'm doing something wrong with my parenting, I'm actually going to listen and be like, okay, well, what is it? What resources do you have behind that?
But see, you realize that makes you in a very small percentage of people. You realize that, right? Because if someone comes to most people and says, hey, I might have a better way for you to do that, or I see a flaw in the way you're doing something. For most people, their response is defensive and angry. But you have I agree, that's the way I try to be, because that's the right way, because I can always be learning. I'm sure that I'm doing a million things wrong. If someone can come into my life and offer something that's going to help me, why would I get all defensive like I know everything? Like, who are you? Get away from me. No, I'll receive that and I'll say, well, maybe this guy's right, you know? And
the only thing that bothers me is personal attacks against me that are actually personal attacks.
Right.
Like, my parents had a really messy divorce, and I did not want to be involved at all, and people kept trying to involve me. Not my mom, like, she's been really great about that, but the reason I don't talk to my dad is because he wanted me to be involved, and I just didn't want to talk about it. Like, I'll maintain my relationship with you, but I don't want to talk about this. Right. Well, because I'm still talking to my mom, he takes it personally, and then the personal attacks start. Like, and then, his mom, my grandma, actually called me a lot of really mean, nasty names.
Oh, really?
Personal, horrible things against me. I wouldn't even call my worst enemy these things.
Yeah, that's horrible.
That's when I'm like, all right, we're done. Yeah. I can't allow you to sin against me anymore. You can't have a personal attack, like, against my character of who I am, because I know that my principles are rooted in God. Right. They're rooted in the Bible. Right. Like, XYZ is why I think that what you are doing is wrong, and that's fine. That's your problem. Right. But I am not going to justify this or pretend like it's okay. Right. All right. Well, if I'm like high and mighty and being judgmental, and my character is being attacked because I'm being judgmental, I'm not going to deal with that. Right. I'm just not going to deal with it. Yeah. So I'm fine until people start calling me personal names and attacking my character. Sure. Everything else, I'm willing to listen and learn and have an open ear. And I've changed my mind a lot in the last 2 years. Right, because what you were just describing as far as personal attacks, that's not constructive in any way. No. That's not offering any kind of help. That's just trying to hurt the person and tear them down for no reason. But there's a difference, right, between, even though if you try to offer correction and instruction to somebody, they might take that as an offense. But I would say that's their problem then. Yeah. But if someone's personally attacking you, then that the whole purpose behind that is to hurt you.
you know?
I like to mull things over too, you know? If somebody actually has a legitimate complaint against me, I will think about it for a week.
Wow.
Before I get back to them.
Nice.
I don't like to see things right away. If I truly don't know, like, how to respond in the moment, and I really haven't thought about it or looked into it, if there's something within me that's feeling unsettled and emotional, I just don't respond. I'll get back to you when I'm ready to talk.
You'll respond eventually.
Yeah.
You don't just leave it alone and never go back.
No, I don't just leave it alone and never go back. I mull it over. I talk to people privately that I'm close to, that I know are Christians and can give me advice.
There you go.
My family's difficult, so it's usually family, but there's been some friends too where I've been like, hey, like, and that's the thing, is going to somebody in private and talking like for advice on another private situation. Whereas I think a lot of people use their drama as an excuse to talk badly about one another. Yeah. And I'm not for that.
Right. So are you like estranged right now from your dad? Do you guys ever talk, or are you guys totally not even on speaking terms?
We don't really talk unless it's about my brother. Okay. Because my brother's not 18 yet. He's still 17. Right. We brought him here with us for a wedding and funeral, and so my dad is his legal guardian. Right. You know, as his dad. So I have to talk to my dad about like plans and stuff.
Okay. Are you still close with Isaac?
Oh yeah. Okay. We haven't seen each other in like a year and a half though, because we both live out of state, and so the only time we see each other is when we're both here in town. Right. Even though like he's in Oregon and I'm in Washington. Yeah, you're probably closer there than if one of you still lived here. Yeah. Right. But we come down every once in a while for family things, and that's when we see each other. Okay. And I like the whole reason I'm even having kids so close together is because my brother and I are 6 years apart. Boy and a girl. We had nothing in common. Right. I feel like I didn't even have a sibling. And now that we're becoming adults, I am actually able to have conversations with them. It's really cool.
It's so neat how that happens, and that's why, because like Aiden and Laura were at each other their whole lives. Like they were just constantly, you know, and she'll admit this, that she was very mean to him growing up, and she has a lot of regret and guilt about that now.
I feel the same way about my brother. Yeah. I was mean to him.
Sure. Because it's the age gap, and it's boys are gross at that age. I don't know if it's a boy. It'd be different if I had a sister or whatever. But now that they're both adults, they're really close. I mean, and they live far apart. He lives here. She lives down in Whittier area. But they're, you know, when they see each other, they have a much stronger relationship now than they did when they were kids. And that's what I try to tell, like, because now Addie and Asher are the same way. Yeah. And I keep trying to remind, because Asher is always like, oh, Addie hates me and she hates me. And I'm like, she's 15. Just, you know, relax. When you guys are, you know, 25 and 23, you guys are probably best friends. You know, you just have to wait it out. It's just kind of the way it is. So, so that's awesome. Yeah. So, what are we doing? Dang, we're flying. So, real quick, we'll go to, and I always ask this, and this will end with this as far as the politics section, then we'll take a break and we'll come back into spirituality. But this is kind of neat because we've really kind of been touching on all three the whole time. Yeah. You know, this is kind of awesome.
Well, they're so interwoven.
They are, and I agree. I think, especially for a Christian, right, it's hard to separate politics from your spiritual beliefs, or even music from your spiritual beliefs, right?
I would say it's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the three things that I feel like really identify who a person is and how they view the world. Yeah. Even people that aren't religious per se, right? They have a religious experience with the music they like, whether they want to word it that way or not. It's, you know, that's why you even have people that go to music festivals and they say, well, what was it? Oh, it's just euphoric, or it was an experience, it was emotional. It's like all that is what's happening inside them. That goes beyond, I like that song. You know, it becomes more than that, you know. But anyway, one thing that I always ask during politics is just like, and you may have already touched on this or not, but like, what do you see as the biggest issue facing our world? Or if you want to go smaller, you can say our country, if you want to keep it within our own system. If I had to pick one issue?
Yeah, just like, in other words, like you are given the power tomorrow to change any one thing in the whole world.
Well,
what would you change?
That's such a hard thing, because if you ask me what the biggest issue is, I would say it's a lack of God. Right. But I can't mandate God. Right, because we'd be living in colonial England.
And when you say a lack of God, you mean a lack of people that are trusting in God.
I would say that
because there's still the same amount of God that there's always been, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would say it's the disillusion. Honestly, I would say that the church is failing our country. The church needs to be stepping up a lot more than it is today. There needs to stop being this like celebrity church culture that's happening.
Right.
I think I saw a stat. It was like 5% of Christian artists are making 90% of the music or something. It was something like that. It was like 90% of the music is made by like the same 5 artists.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and
you're just talking about in the Christian music world.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Man, these are all so interwoven.
Yeah.
If I was president, if Brianna was president, what would I do? I would say I would get rid of the majority of the way that our system is run.
Okay.
I would make so many laws against big pharma.
Okay.
Because I think that the pharmaceutical companies it's the most powerful company.
Yeah.
Or the most powerful system in the world. Like food and the Food and Drug Administration would be gone immediately. The FDA immediately.
Okay.
Gone.
Wow.
Gone. That would be the first thing I would do.
You'd have to put up like electrified fences all around the White House because they'd be out to kill you after doing something like that.
Yeah. I would probably ban things from coming. Well, no, because I'm a libertarian technically. I was going to say I would ban things coming in from China because I feel like China is so morally the opposite of the United States, but they're playing this horrible political game.
Yeah. Do you think they're our biggest concern as far as other countries go?
Being in the military, 100%, China is our biggest enemy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Biggest. There's no other country that comes close to China. Because even Russia, Russia's not that powerful.
That's what usually people say is Russia.
No.
Whenever you watch the movies, it's always Russian guys that are the bad guys, right?
No. China has far surpassed them.
Okay.
Because Russia, the only reason they're invading right now is because they need to. Like, most of Russia is uninhabitable. They have very little land that is usable, and they have very little protection against that land.
Okay.
So, like, the reason they invade other countries is to have buffer on their border. Like, that's why so many countries were being invaded in the first place.
Taiwan recently, was that them that took over Taiwan or tried to take over Taiwan?
Well, I mean, China lays claim to Taiwan.
Right.
So, like...
But they're supposed to be their own...
Yeah, there's a weird...
They're like the Vatican City or something.
Depending on who you ask worldwide, Taiwan is not a country, and it is a country.
Right.
It's very complicated.
Okay.
Yeah. But the United States recognizes them, I believe, as their own country.
Okay.
But China lays claim that they've always been a part of China.
Right.
Because I think what happened was when communism was taking over China... there was like obviously the other government that was already there before that was fighting against the communism. They fled to Taiwan.
Oh, wow.
And that's been their stronghold.
Okay.
So they've been their own country. And it's because they're not communist.
Yeah.
So you can't.
Right. You have polar opposite governing systems. I mean, how can you live together like that? You
can't.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you say just the whole system, and the first thing to go would be the FDA.
I'm an extremely conservative libertarian. I don't necessarily believe in open borders, but I do believe that our government is way too big. I think that we need to cut our government back down to like when it was first established.
Well, how does the size of our government and open or closed borders, how do those two even correlate?
Well, so libertarians in general believe in open borders.
Okay.
And I would say that's my one disagreement with them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying as a libertarian you believe. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought you were comparing the two things as if they had something to do with each other.
Yeah.
Like, I believe in small government, but I'm kind of on the board. I'm like, what does that have to do?
Sorry, I know that was confusing.
No, you're good. That's why I
think
clarified.
because a lot of people that are libertarians but are like Christian conservatives will say that like they have disagreements with the libertarian parties or simple like certain policies like abortion.
Right.
Like there is no argument that can ever convince a true Bible-believing Christian that abortion is okay.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's a selfishly murdering of a baby.
Right.
The body. Like, you can't even argue with science.
Right.
Because biologically, human life begins at conception.
Right.
which is a whole other topic that people don't think about, is the fertility industry. There's millions of frozen embryos right now that are abandoned.
Right.
And the fertility industry right now is working on making artificial wombs to cut out the woman out of the process.
Really?
Yep.
Then what was that? What was that
China
movie?
successfully got a lamb to like a few weeks gestation, an artificial womb.
A lamb?
A lamb.
Not with a human fetus.
A lamb.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Why is it always a lamb? Why do they do that? The first cloned animal was the sheep, right?
Yeah.
Why do they always use sheep?
I don't know. Maybe it's a symbol of Christ.
Maybe, without them even realizing it.
Yeah. Could just be biologically, like, they're similar to us in that way.
Right.
But I don't know why they would use a lamb.
Yeah.
I just know that that's what they're working on right now.
Yeah, and to me, and again, I've said this a million times on here, but I mean, to me, the only argument that's worth arguing about when it comes to abortion between a pro-life and a pro-choice person is when does that life start, right? Because most even pro-choice people are not going to tell you, yes, I think it's totally fine to kill your baby.
Yeah.
They don't word it that way because they don't think you're killing a baby. That's their whole point. It's not a baby. Where the pro-choice or pro-life person is like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sperm to egg, that's a baby. You know, I don't care what you say.
Like, honestly, I've spent so many years arguing with people over abortion that it's exhausting to me.
It does, yeah.
I don't even like talking about it anymore, but
yeah.
I don't even think that it should be an argument. If you're a Christian and you believe in the sanctity of human life, I get from an evolutionary perspective, like why that wouldn't matter.
Right.
If you believe in evolution, then like none of us matter anyway.
Right.
None of life is pointless. Yeah. But if you have any sort of moral compass, because the Bible says that God puts eternity on the hearts of men. Yeah. That's your moral compass, and it should be pointing you to look for a higher power. Yeah. If you believe in right and wrong, that there are some things that are inherently right and inherently wrong, congratulations, you believe in something that's of a spiritual perspective. Right. Whether or not you believe in God.
Which they won't admit to.
Yeah.
Right.
Congratulations, you're just like the rest of us.
Yeah, right. And I've heard people use that argument many times where they'll say, well, do you think, they'll say something like, do you think murder is wrong? Do you think rape is wrong? And the atheist will be like, well, of course. Okay. And the Christian goes, why? Yeah. And he goes, well, just because it is. He's like, says who? Yeah. If there's no God, why is it wrong, right? Like, the Christian has a reason. He can say, oh, it's wrong because God says it's wrong. That's why it's wrong, you know?
Well, and this is why political topics and religion are so intertwined. Right. You cannot separate them. It's impossible. Yeah. So, like, going back to what I would change if I was president all of a sudden, I don't know if there's anything that I really could change that would make an impact. Right. Because it doesn't matter what happens politically. What matters is in the individual heart. Right. And that's why I'm not a Calvinist. Because we have free will to choose. We all make choices. Right. It says that God puts the eternity on all men's hearts. Right. And that we diligently seek him even if we don't realize it. Right. That we're seeking the truth behind what's happening in this world. We need to know and understand. That's why people seek out the mysteries of the cosmos, because they're looking for something that they can't find. Right. And it's the job of the church to step in and say, this is the truth. It's the job of the individual people. Yeah. Churches aren't doing enough to reach out to their community. Yeah. They just don't. Like, you can't show up on Sunday, get in a sermon, and maybe talk for an hour after and then leave. Like, people need to be doing more outreach. Right. There needs to be a fire put in the hearts of every single person that claims to be a Christian to go out, go to the beaches, start telling people that you meet about Jesus. Right. Especially here, because this area, there's no middle class anymore. Really. Like, there's a handful of people that grew up here that happened to get in right before things got crazy with the economy. Right. You can't, like, in order to buy a house now, you have to have like $100,000 minimum, like dual income. But besides the point, everybody that lives here is either extremely wealthy or extremely unwealthy, very poor. And these are the people that are hardest to reach, in my opinion.
The poorest people or the richer people?
The richest people are the hardest, but then the extremely impoverished, I think, here in California, when I say extremely impoverished, I think like they're working so hard that they don't have time for anything else because they're working all these jobs to try to make it work. Right. and they just don't have time, honestly, to be thinking about these things. They're just trying to put food on their table.
Yeah, they're trying to stay alive another day.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think that those are the two people hardest to reach, and also like the college towns. You know, there's Cal Poly and Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people, young kids, that are getting into college. They don't know what they're doing. Their college is telling them all these things. They go and they become liberals, and they hate God. Yeah. Because that's what they're indoctrinated for.
That's what they're trying to do.
They're being primed for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the job of the Christian church is supposed to be to reach out to those people, to the what I would consider unreached people.
Yeah. And you think it's failing?
I think they're failing, yeah.
Okay.
I think because California is so divided, there's an extremely powerful, strong, very small Christian community that kind of flows through. Mm-hmm. And most of the main revivals that happen in the United States come from California. And it's been really cool to see. Yeah. But, like, we can't just do those every few decades. Right. We need to be, like, it needs to be a part of our identity, is reaching out to people daily. Right. We are not Pentecostals, my husband and I, but we have some friends that are extremely charismatic, and that's been interesting to see and to work through as somebody that grew up like middle ground. Right. But it's like something that they're doing right is they have the heart for the people. Right. They want they want to see the Holy Spirit change people. Yeah, and I think everybody, I mean, whether I disagree with them theologically or doctrinally or whatever, I think for most genuine Christians, that is their heart. Their method might be different than mine, but I think ultimately they want other people to be saved and to be following the Lord, you know. Definitely. And he, so Autumn is your oldest. Mm-hmm. And then you have another one, which is Maple Love.
Maple Love. Yeah. Okay.
I love Autumn, the names, by the way. Autumn, Joy, Maple Love, and we have another baby.
Do you know what you're having?
I do.
Okay. You don't have to tell me on air. You don't have to
we're not telling people. Right. We're not telling my family.
Oh, okay.
Because there's so many. Honestly, it's whether or not it's a boy or a girl. There's so many girls in my family, and they keep telling me like, "Oh, you better be having a boy." Mm-hmm. So, like, it got me to the point where I'm like, I don't even want to tell you what I'm having now, even if it was a boy. I'm not going to tell you.
You guys do like the gender reveal party thing, or do you like just give birth and then send pictures?
We did for Maple, and I really wanted to be a boy mom my whole life. I didn't want girls at all.
Oh, funny.
I never got along with girls growing up. I always wanted to be with the boys. Right. They're just more fun. Yeah. You know? I grew up with all boys in my neighborhood, so I wanted to be a boy mom, and the Lord has blessed me with girls.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. I have a lot of friends like that who have all girls or all boys. Like, it's like one or the other. Like, we've gotten two of each, which is kind of awesome. We're like, okay, cool, you know? Yeah.
I wouldn't change it for the world, though, having two girls. Yeah. I wouldn't change it for the world. That's why this third baby, I'm like, I would feel bad wanting anything other than whatever I am given. Right. Because whoever God gives me is like, they were meant to be here always.
Tailor-made for you specifically and your husband, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And what are the ages of your kids?
Autumn just turned 3. Okay. Maple just turned 1. Wow. And then we're our next one is due beginning of February.
Wow. Yeah. Man, that's young all together like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Like, the whole reason I'm doing this is because, for one, I love birth. Mm-hmm. I love giving birth. Having the experience of it in its full form of the way it's supposed to be is addicting. Right. It's incredible. You really feel God transforming you in those moments.
Right. And you go totally natural?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's nothing you can do at home. Right. Like, I rent a birth tub. Okay. And I would say that's extremely awesome for pain management.
You don't like make sure your midwife has like heroin on hand or anything for pain?
No. That's funny because people always want to talk bad about fentanyl. Well, if you have an epidural, like, honey, you're taking fentanyl.
Is that fentanyl?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's fentanyl in there.
Oh, crazy.
So people have absolutely no room to talk because if you're going to a hospital for unnecessary drugs just so that you feel better, you have no reason to talk bad about somebody on the street doing drugs to feel better.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
That I'm sure many people do not share.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure it's very controversial. Yeah. But I don't understand why it would be legal in a hospital and not everywhere else.
Right. Well, because they have the authority to administer said drugs. See, that's why they got the paper on the wall to show that they're authorized.
Well, there's a time and a place, but for unnecessary things like birth, like that crosses the blood-brain barrier, crosses the placenta barrier.
I'm with you.
So, like, you should not be exposing your baby to fentanyl when you're in labor.
Right.
This is actually one of the reasons why there's low breastfeeding rates, is because it affects breastfeeding.
Yeah.
It affects the hormonal process.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know, but Bethany, all 4 of them, she did totally natural.
That's awesome.
We were in the hospital all 4 times, but she had nothing.
Yeah.
For any of them, like nothing. Like it's like
it's amazing.
I mean, I'm in awe. I'm like, dang, I would have been like, give me everything, knock me out, wake me up when it's over, or whatever. But she's like you. She talks about the experience, and I always forget which. I want to say it was after Addie, but she turned to me and said that she said 10 was a good number. Like she wanted to have a total of 10 children, and I'm thinking, now had she been on some drugs, maybe I would have been like, okay, she's a little loopy, she's seeing pink elephants and stuff, but no, she was dead serious. Yeah, we decided not to have 10 children, which I think is better for everybody. Yeah, but I just thought that was amazing to me. Yeah, and that was right after the birth. Like she literally just went through pain and pushed this child out of her, and that was her response. Let's have 10 of these. Yeah, I want to do that. 7 more times.
The day after my firstborn, Michael asked me if I wanted to have another baby soon. I was like, yeah, like let's do that again. That was fun.
Right. Wow. See.
And it's that honestly, that's amazing that she was able to do all 4 naturally in the hospital, because they ask you in the hospital, they really push it.
They push it. Yeah.
This is why, like, I don't really feel the judgment towards the moms, because if they didn't do the education themselves, like, yeah, that's on them. Like, right. But also, like, the hospitals do not make it easy. Yeah. To when you actually do have a birth plan, you know what you want.
Yeah, they try to go against it.
They judge you
they
so
do.
hard.
Yeah.
And there's something called medical manipulation and coercion, where people look at a doctor and then they're telling them, they're fear-mongering them into certain things, or they're like, oh, like this is the way that you should be doing it, and suddenly the mom questions her intuition, and that's like one of the first parts of the disconnection from her own motherhood. Right. So, yeah. It really is all connected.
Yeah, there was one, and again, I don't remember. I'm so bad at timing, but I don't remember which child it was with. Yeah. But there was one where she was in a lot of pain, and she was even saying that she because the nurse was like, well, we can give you something. And in that moment, she's like, oh, okay, or whatever. Yeah. But we had talked prior, and she had told me, no matter what I say, I do not want any drugs. Like, do not let even me convince you that I'm in the middle of it, right? And I always use it.
That's like from Harry Potter.
Yeah, it is, right? And I think about those movies where there's always some situation where it's like, okay, after midnight, I'm going to turn into a werewolf. You need to lock me in this cage, right? Now, when that happens, I'm going to say everything I can say for you to let me out. Do not listen to me, right? Yeah. I'm not in my right mind. Don't do it, right? And then that person starts pleading, oh, please, no, please, just let me, Or did you ever read The Silver Chair? Did you read the Chronicles of Narnia?
When I was a real small kid, my mom read me all the Narnia books. Okay. But I don't really remember.
You probably don't remember, but in that one was a unique story, because it was like the prince who had been kidnapped, he was under a spell. And it was the opposite of that scenario. It was where there was a certain time of day, I think it was at night or something, where he became the actual prince. Like the spell was broken, and he knew who he was. He knew he had been kidnapped. Yeah. And so, but the setup was, okay, now at this time, I'm going to say crazy things because I'm going under a spell. Don't believe anything I tell you. But that was the false guy saying, that was the under the spell guy saying that way they wouldn't believe the truth. Oh, you see what I'm saying? Man. So then he breaks out of the spell and he's like, no, I'm Prince so-and-so. I'm the lost prince, blah, 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 blah. But they were told, no, he's talking crazy talk. Don't listen to him. Yeah. So that just blew my mind. I was like, oh, wow, that's such a cool kind of reversal of that. But
well, it's also like, I think in Acts, as Paul was saying, like if somebody would give you a gospel other than me, or even if it was me and somebody would give you a gospel other than the one of Jesus.
Right, even an angel. Yeah. Yeah.
Like even if it's coming from me or an angel, do not listen to it.
Which is an amazing statement, because that shows that even Paul is admitting, maybe I can get corrupt maybe the gospel I preached 30 years after the first one, maybe I've gotten corrupted. Maybe I've been...
Yeah.
But the first one I preached, that's the real deal. So if I ever say anything other than that, you should be accursed or whatever, right? It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Hardcore.
It's pretty incredible.
So, all right, well, let's jump in our last hour here. We are doing... Wow, we are flying through this thing, man. It's been 2.5 hours. Can you believe that?
Well, you got me talking about birth. So.
Hey, it's your passion.
Yeah,
I love it. And what's cool is I haven't really
forever.
had that on here yet. So I like to have kind of new things that come up.
Well, I consider this the focal point of what I would believe the main issue of our culture today
is
birth really goes into like how the family unit is started.
Absolutely.
And it's when you are messing with God's design, I think it makes a really big impact, lasting longer than anybody could ever imagine. And there's all these factors later on that you don't even realize are from this thing.
Right.
But, you mess with God's design, it's going to mess with you your whole life, and you don't even realize
Well, like you said, he's smarter than us.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's kind of walk through, like I said, I want to get back into the church and like its role today, but I just kind of walk me through. I mean, obviously I know some of it because I kind of watched you grow up, but your parents weren't Christians when you were born, correct? Or such and kind of. Like your mom told me she grew up in the church kind of thing, but I think it's similar to us, to where Laura was like 2.5 or 3 when Bethany and I got saved. So it wasn't like we came into that, but like as far as you can remember, you kind of grew up in the church, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up in the church. My earliest memories of the church were going to the preschool at Calvary Chapel. Okay. When they still had a preschool.
Yeah, that's where Laura went too.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was a great way to grow up. I loved growing up in the church. It really felt like Calvary Chapel was my home, my whole life. Like the people there, the elders there, the people that I would see every day that like really loved me.
Right.
Like even if I just saw them once a week, I could tell like they really cared about me.
Yeah.
It was great. And even when my parents were not doing well, like I was always passionate. I've always loved church. I love the Lord. There was nothing that anybody can do to change my mind. And then I think around high school when Connor came back.
Oh yeah.
Everything changed and it did not feel like my home anymore.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Like when he took over, you mean, or like when?
When he started taking over.
Oh, okay.
Like basically the moment he got back from Bristol, England, I noticed a huge shift in the church.
Okay.
I noticed a lot of the older, wise people in the church leave.
Yeah, there's a lot of the people that were there when we started are no longer there. I noticed that too.
It was all around that time. I don't know what happened behind closed doors.
Who does, right? Only those back there.
Yeah, I just know that the older, what I would consider wise people that I looked forward to seeing, and I looked forward to being older and asking for wisdom from them. Right. They all disappeared.
Okay. And so it was more like some of the parental figures that you had grown up with were gone. Yeah. So that's why it felt not as like home.
I mean, honestly, they probably didn't even realize how much I looked up to them, but I did because they were always there.
Is there any specific people that you feel that way about, like that you?
Honestly, I would say there's probably like at least 10 different sets of older couples that.
Oh wow.
That I grew up just watching from a distance that I felt were a good example for me.
Oh, nice.
That like I didn't even really necessarily talk to them a lot. I would see them as a good example for like how I wanted to live.
That's awesome.
And then about high school I think is when the majority of them left. And that's about when Connor came back. Okay. And I just associate it all with Connor because I just know that when he came back, that's when all this changes started happening.
Right, that's what I was kind of getting at.
He's probably a great person. There's nothing wrong with him that I know of. But, like, even the church, like, they had all those beautiful murals on the inside. Like, all those hand-painted, like gorgeous artwork on the walls. And that just all got painted white.
Oh, yeah.
It just felt like the personality of the church died.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't remember that until you just said that they had that on there.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I probably take this way more personally than it was ever meant to be.
Right,
but
right.
I don't know. It's,
it's like too much change.
Yeah. Yeah. You grow up in a place and it's like your home. And then you realize that it's not really yours.
Yeah.
It was never mine.
Right.
But it was the home that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So I did leave for the Army after graduating. And when I came back, everything was different.
You came back to Calvary after
Well, just for visiting.
Okay.
I was really looking forward to coming back and visiting like on Sunday and going to church.
And your parents were still attending there at that time, right?
They were on and off, I think, every once in a while. And it was also during like COVID was like one of the times I came to visit, and it just everyone was gone. Everyone was gone.
Yeah, that was a weird time for I think a lot of churches.
It was weird. So like I went in and I just felt like I couldn't be there anymore. It really broke my heart.
So did you go anywhere else, or did you just go nowhere?
No. So also around high school, my parents got really into Torah observant Christianity, right? Which is also just like Hebrew roots movement.
Ooh, she would hate you saying that.
I know.
She clarified many times with me that that's not what she believes.
Well,
is Hebrew root stuff.
It's barely different. It's barely different, honestly. It's all the same though. Like Michael and I got really into it. We were for a few years actually like doing the best that we could, like trying to observe everything, trying to do everything right, Sabbath, not eating pork, trying to do all the biblical feasts. And then we got to a point where we felt so disconnected from Christianity, where it felt like we're not even following God anymore.
Like you almost went so far back into the old covenant that it was Jesus was no longer a part of it, kind of a thing.
Well, not that he was no longer a part of it. It just felt like he was not the main character anymore.
Okay.
It was all this other stuff that we had to do.
Right.
And like the more that we got into that, the more disillusioned we felt, the more disconnected we felt from the church. And it was so isolating. And we kept asking, like, God, like, open up our eyes if we're doing something wrong. And very slowly, one at a time, he would, like, a Bible verse would come up that would change everything. Like, for the not eating meat, there's, I believe it's, like, Acts 11, where it's Peter's vision.
Yeah.
And there's a direct parallel between the unclean foods and the Gentiles.
Yeah.
A direct parallel.
That's the point of that verse.
Yeah, you can't separate the two.
No.
So after we read that, like, that was like our final tipping point where we're like, we're done. We can't do this anymore. Like, none of this matters. Like, sure, like, we're gonna have the biblical feast in heaven, and when we get there, like, God's gonna teach us how to do it. But
it's gonna be
it's
some
too
good
much
food,
work.
man.
Yeah, it's too much work for us to try to do it, and it's trying to do everything exactly right, like the way that it's supposed to be traditionally.
Right.
We lost the plot. We lost the plot.
So once you guys came to that conclusion, did you like sit down with your parents and explain that to them, or did you just kind of like, because I'm sure they probably didn't take that well.
No. Well, by then it was my mom and dad were separated.
Oh, okay. So it's pretty recent then, because that only happened.
I would say we probably
4 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, we climbed out of this hole about a year ago, I would say.
Okay.
And it was around the time too where we met when we were in Washington. Okay, I'm gonna have to go back a few more steps to explain our church situation.
That's right, we got the time.
Yes. So when we moved to North Carolina, I tried going to a Calvary chapel there, and they were teaching Calvinism. And I left because I'm like, Calvinist, like, I'm not going to a Calvinist church.
That is not normal for a Calvary chapel.
No. And it's not that he was the pastor was teaching. He was a real young guy, like in his 20s, and I could tell, like, he went to Bible school, but he reads a lot of books that would be in a Christian bookstore that are not suitable, I think.
Yeah.
But he was saying that there's really good arguments for Calvinism, and that we need to look into it for ourselves, and like, here's the perspective and stuff. But it seemed like he was really leaning towards Calvinism, and I'm like, like, I don't really, this is not what I want. Right. We looked for a bunch of different churches, didn't really fit in anywhere. And then being in the Army, I moved to Washington, and you really can't find a good biblically grounded church in Washington. Oh, wow. There's every denomination that you could possibly think of is in Washington, and there's nothing like Calvary Chapel. Right. Like, I'm sure there's a few, but we found one recently that we go to once in a while.
Is it a Calvary Chapel, or is it?
It's I think it's a church that was like started out with a bunch of people that were going to Calvary Chapel that just wanted a smaller church. So they started their own like small group, and it grew. Right. And everyone's really passionate. It's cool. Okay. Yeah. But we were so burnt out on looking for churches and from being so disconnected from Christianity for so many years, from like trying to be Torah observant, that we were just burnt out. We were done looking. We're like, we'll just move back to California, and then we'll go to one of the churches that we know that are there that are really rooted in truth and that aren't ignoring the spiritual aspect, but aren't ignoring the theology aspect, because that's important. Yeah. And I think that's what Calvary does perfectly. Right. It's the perfect marriage between the fundamentalists and the Pentecostal church. Yeah. It's the middle ground where we want the spirit and the truth together. Right. And that's what I grew up with, and that's what I believe is the right way to do things. Right. And it's hard to find a church that does both. Right. It's either too intellectual or it's too wackadoodle. Yeah. Right? It's like one or the other. You go in there and people are barking like dogs and they're flopping around on the floor and they're saying that's the spirit. They're screaming and falling on the floor, or they're like they don't want to see any, they don't believe in any sort of miracle. Right. Yeah. It's all just book work. Yeah. You know, it's like, all right, you know, this is a lesson. This is like going to college or something, you know. And I'm with you. I think it needs to be both, because it's like each side of that will say, like the people that are way far Pentecostal will be like, oh, we don't need the scriptures. We just live by the Spirit. And I'm like, well, what if a scripture goes against what you're doing? Which very often does. Almost always. Yes. But they don't want to hear that. They're like, well, who are you to tell me? I got the Spirit in me doing all that. And it's like, no. The Holy Spirit's leading me. Yeah. Are you sure that's not your own voice? Exactly. And how do you know? They claim to be able to teach people how to prophesy and how to speak in tongues. Right. Which actually, so we were so disillusioned, and I had my daughter, Maple, my second born, and we had Christian midwives, and one of them invited us to a Friday night Bible study small group that they do every week. We go, the people running it are amazing. We love them. We still do. They're very devout, great people. They're also, though, extremely charismatic Pentecostals. Oh boy. And we didn't really know. Because that was not the root of our fellowship. The fellowship was food, music, prayer, and fellowship. We talked to each other about life. We'd pray for one another. Yeah. Like the early church. Yeah. It was literally what they're doing is what the early church was doing. Right. And it was such a breath of fresh air, because we're like, this is the way that things are supposed to be. Absolutely. Well, we get invited to their church. We go, and all of my red flags are going off. Oh no. People falling on the ground and everyone speaking in tongues, but there's no interpreter. Right. Right. The Bible says you must have an interpreter. Right. That's why I don't believe that speaking in tongues is random babbling, but that's a whole other topic. I agree with you. And I think it's very clear. You look at even the Greek, it's the word glossa. It means language, known language. Yeah. So when people try this, hamana, it's like, what language is that? Yeah. Oh, it's just a spiritual language. Well, if you look at what actually happened on Pentecost. Yes. It was people from all over the world that were in Jerusalem for a festival, like they were supposed to be. Right. And they all spoke different languages, and there was one guy saying the gospel for the very first time to all of them. Yeah. And they all understood it in their own language. Right. And I feel like when you get that spiritual high, they were praying for 40 days. When you have that spiritual high, you look like you're drunk. Yes. With happiness and with love and with joy. Right. And people, you're in tears when you're in that state. So when it says that, they're drunk, that's how I look at it. I don't see it as they're acting like they're drunk babbling fools. Right. I see they're so emotional, and because I've been drunk, you know, I get very emotional, I get teary, I get really spiritual. I want to oh man, you got to go to church with me. Yeah, you start preaching the gospel, right? That's I know people like that too. If I have a couple glasses of wine, I get very Christian. I start speaking the gospel to people, and that's why I don't really believe there's anything wrong with having a couple glasses of wine, because it's promoted in all the festivals, you know. Well, drunkenness is not okay, but I don't agree with Christians to say you can't have a beer, or you can't have unless it's causing someone to stumble. That's the only problem. I think that alcohol, though, does have a gift of loosening up people to have those deeper conversations of you're relaxed, you are in a room full of people, or maybe just you and one other person. You're able to have these deeper, more emotional conversations because your mind is in a different state. Sure. You know? Sure. And you just don't want to get to a different state where you're doing stupid things because the alcohol's taken over to the point now you're the people wake up the next day what happened? Yeah.
I don't remember last night, Well, let me tell you what happened.
There's definitely different levels of drunkenness. Like you can have a couple glasses and unwind and like get in that emotional state without being fully like plastered.
Right.
And also, like, alcoholism is extremely bad for you.
Sure.
You shouldn't be doing that.
Oh, sure. Especially when the addiction factor creeps in,
Yeah. But, like, I guess back to the whole Pentecostal thing, like, Michael and I never really were ever exposed to anything like that. So we went on some deep dives because we've got these extremely devout, incredible Christians that are doing things the way that we see the Bible doing things with their fellowship group on Friday. Like, this is what the church is supposed to look like. But also, like, we don't believe that we should be, like, shouting random things and saying that it's tongues.
Sure. Yeah.
So we went on a deep dive for the spiritual gifts, and I think we've come to a really healthy place where, like, we're not going to be unauthentic. We're not going to force anything, which I think a lot of people in the Pentecostal church do.
Yeah.
They get caught up in the emotions and they see all these people doing all these things. And then, like, for us, we're like, well, what's wrong with us that we can't do these things too? Like, I'm not going to lie about it. I think most of it's honestly just like some BS.
It is. No, it is. It's people wanting to feel special.
Yeah.
I want to be like that. I want to be spiritual.
Yeah.
It's like, where in Acts 2 did the disciples decide, hey guys, how about today we speak in tongues? What do you think? No, it just happened. Why? Because God did it.
Yeah.
That's what tongues is. God does it. You don't have to practice. You don't have to prepare. It just happens.
It's Corinthians, it says that for those who prophesy, there is an interpreter. For those who speak in tongues, there's an interpreter.
Right.
Like, and everything's of one spirit.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit's not going to interrupt himself.
Exactly.
So, like, these things are important. And we should be, as Christians, seeking out what this means and how this applies to us and what we should be doing with it.
Right.
And we shouldn't be forcing it. Which I felt so, like, forced, because it really does feel like if you're not involved doing all those other things that these people are doing, it feels like there's something wrong with you. And honestly, like, deep down, a lot of their doctrines do teach that if you can't do this, then there's something wrong with you. That you need to have something released from you.
I had a guy tell me that one
back.
time. I had a guy ask me that when we used to meet over in the donut shop years ago. In fact, your dad came a couple times when we used to meet. It was a long time ago. A couple guys we used to meet over there 6 a.m. at the Golden Donut over there in Orchid.
Nice.
It was one of the best times of my spiritual walk. But
that's amazing.
We had a guy. We'd always have people come in there and just sit down with us.
Oh.
And sometimes they were like really encouraging and they were joining us. Other times they wanted to fight with us. They wanted to argue with us and stuff. And this one time, this guy comes down, sits down. He's all uptight. He's just, you just see he's not happy, and he's and he's kind of having Bible study with us. And he's talking to us. We're just having a discussion, and he, and he starts kind of getting on his soapbox about this and that, and I think a couple of us started to disagree with him and just say, well, I don't agree, and here's why. And he started to get all like, and then he started just doing things. He'd tell me, he's like, well, do you speak in tongues? I said, no. And he goes, oh, well, well, obviously I can't believe anything you say then, because you must not be saved, and it's like, oh my gosh, dude, really? That's your litmus test if someone's saved, whether or not they speak in tongues. Yeah. But there's people like that, because they say, look at all the spots in Acts where people got saved, they spoke in tongues. Not every time. Yeah. You have 3 spots in Acts where that happened. Paul didn't speak in tongues when he got saved. There's a lot of people in the Bible that didn't. It's not a requirement.
No, it's not
just what happens.
Well, and the only thing the Bible says about salvation is that it's through Jesus Christ alone.
There you go.
It's your belief in Jesus Christ.
There it is.
That's it.
Simple. Yeah.
Congratulations, you believe in Jesus Christ. You could be on your deathbed and you're saved.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fundamentalists though that would disagree. They would say that predestination would cause you to have a life change, and you can't just say that you believe in Jesus on your deathbed and then die and you're saved,
right? Because
it's supposed to be like a lifetime commitment.
Well, let's delve into that a little bit. So, like, if someone, like, have you ever met somebody that says to you, "I'm a Christian," or "I believe in Jesus Christ"? They say the words, but then as you get to know them, you start to doubt that that's real.
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know them by their fruits.
Correct.
Like,
so people can say the words, but it doesn't mean anything unless there is that internal change of the Lord, you know. And it doesn't mean you're perfect.
Yes.
A Christian's going to sin all the time, but there's going to be a conviction for that sin, you know.
I think people know for sure whether or not they're saved. Like, there's that proverb, you know, not a proverb. There's a verse that talks about the wheats and the tares.
Oh, yeah.
And how they grow up together.
It's a parable in the gospel,
That's the word I was looking for. But they look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And they grow up, and then once the harvest is ready, you can tell which ones are which.
Right. And then he says, do you want us to pull all the weeds out? He's like, no, because you'll get rid of some of the tares.
Yeah.
No, wheat and tares. Pull some of the tares out. You'll get rid of the wheat in the process. You have to wait till they're full.
You have to wait for full maturity.
Yeah. So, isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of should be all of our attitude, because I will never tell somebody you're not saved.
No, that's not my place.
But you know what else I don't think is my place? To tell them you are saved.
Yeah.
I don't think that's my place either. No. Because only God knows that. Now, I can give my best judgment. I can say, well, based on what I know of you, I would guess that you're saved.
Yeah.
Or I would guess you're not.
Yeah.
Because, you go to church on Sundays and you talk the talk, but the rest of your life is anti-Christ. Like, you're, and you're saying things like, oh, yeah, I went out and got hammered on the weekend and slept with 5 different people, and Jesus is my homeboy.
Yeah.
Well, he's not happy with you for doing that. I can tell you that much.
No.
So.
Yeah, that's not right, too. There's theology. For people that don't actually care about theology, it seems so complicated.
Right.
It seems complicated. All you have to do to uncomplicate things is read the Bible yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's clear as day. There's an answer for everything in there.
Yeah.
People can argue about it and talk about it for literally thousands of years.
Right.
Have wars over it. But at the end of the day, God is the same.
Yeah.
He's never changing.
Do you think people can read the Bible and come to the wrong conclusion? Because there's lots of people that will read the same verse and come to completely different
Yes, because I've seen that. I would say I heard a good point in a lot of the books about the churches that, like, Paul wrote letters. He was condemning the false teachers, not necessarily the people that were in the church.
Sure.
He was saying, like, he was calling out the false teachers, and I think that's where the real issue is. It's the false teachers, because you can hear the same verse to somebody, but you can hear a different sermon on it and come to a different conclusion.
Right.
But I think for somebody with absolutely no worldview contortions at all,
but do those people exist? Like, is there anybody alive that doesn't have any worldview?
Well, I think that if somebody were to purely read the Bible with absolutely no knowledge of the Bible prior, there are plenty of unreached peoples that have had the Bible for the first time reading it, and you see the way that they act is like the people in Acts did, where it's like this incredible information and they're just absorbing it all and they're hungry for it.
Right.
I think because those people have had no knowledge or doctrines pushed on them from a young age, from society, because they've never heard it before. Sure. I do think that if somebody read the Bible for themselves without any outside influence, that they would come to the same conclusions. But the problem is the false teachers that have been going on for thousands of years. Right. That go in and they say, well, like, just like Satan, did God really say that? Right. Because I have this different interpretation of it. Yeah. Because you could eat this fruit and maybe you won't, Yeah. Maybe it's because he doesn't want you to be smart. Right. Or something, Sure. And you're right. I mean, I think false teachers have definitely played a big role in that. But I I meet with many different Christians and a lot of times we'll have a good example, you brought up Calvinism. Like, one of my best friends is a Calvinist. Yeah. Like a 5-point Calvinist. Like, he's in with both feet. Yeah. And we'll talk about it all the time. And we'll read the same verse. Like, we'll read Ephesians chapter 1 or Romans 9, and we're reading the same words. We even have the same translation and everything. Mm-hmm. But he's taking away from it something that I'm not taking away from it. Do you see what I'm saying? That's because there's a different doctrine. Right. I think it really depends on who has been raising you up as a Christian. So you think it's that because as we're looking at that verse, we're not able to view it
totally unbiased from what we already know, in a sense.
Now, there's plenty of people on both sides that have switched.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
I honestly, there's different tiers of what matters. Like there's the core doctrines that are important that you can't change, like the Trinity, the deity of Christ, the death, burial, resurrection, and our job as the church to proclaim the gospel to all nations.
Right, like you're not going to find another Christian who says, I don't believe Jesus died.
Yeah.
Or I don't believe Jesus resurrected.
They might be in a cult and say that they are. But
yeah, I mean, for most of us at that moment, we would put them in a different group. We would say, you're not a Christian then.
Yeah.
Because that's a core tenet of what we believe. Like, that's everything.
Yeah.
Paul even said, if there's no resurrection, your faith is futile. So, I mean, that's big.
He even says if you're circumcised, your faith is futile.
Oh, yeah,
like,
right.
If you think that there's something outside of Christ in any capacity that will save you, your faith is futile.
Which goes back into what you're calling Torah observance, right? Is that kind of the way that you view that? As like it's... Because I will say, after talking with your mom, that I've talked to many, I just call it Messianic Judaism. You know, it's, and I know there's many different sects of it and different beliefs within all that. Every other single person I've talked to from any of that side has told me that you need Jesus to be saved, but in order to maintain your salvation, you have to keep the feast, you have to keep the Sabbath, you have to keep the law, right?
And that's where they believe that there's a total heart change.
Yes.
And that you can't continue to follow Christ and not see these things.
Right, but talking to your mom, she's the only person that's ever said the opposite of that. She says, no, I don't think you'll she's like, I don't think that you'll lose your salvation if you don't keep the feasts or keep whatever. You're saved, we'll both be in heaven the same... You know, so I appreciate that at least. There's a lot
of Torah observant Christians that will say that, but then internally they feel like if they can't do the feast exactly right, then they're doing something wrong and it's going to displease God and God's going to be unhappy with them. And, you know, it's a horrible feeling to have. I've experienced it multiple times. And then I was like, wait a minute.
Where's grace in that? Right? I mean, it's, and I think that's exactly what the Jews were struggling with back then. And I read the Old Testament and I see a lot of stuff. It's
the same thing. It's just a different generation.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's this idea that you have to be good enough or you have to do X, Y, Z to a certain thing.
There's nothing we could do.
Right.
There's nothing we could do to please God.
Right.
There's nothing that we could do to make him happy with us. We are saved by the blood of Christ.
Right.
When we give our lives to Christ. Yeah. And that's it. But
after we're saved, let's say we've received Christ, do you think there's anything we can do after that makes him happy? Like if I make the decision to use a weird example, let's say I make the decision to treat my wife kindly as opposed to beat my wife.
Yeah.
He's not going to be indifferent sitting there going, well, Ryan, I mean, either way is fine with me.
Yeah.
No, if I beat my wife, he's going to be displeased with me, and rightly so.
Well, right? I would say that for somebody struggling with something like that, I would argue that maybe they're not even saved.
Right.
Because their heart is not changed.
Yeah, that would be like the evidence of that.
That's the fruit of their labor.
Right.
So I think that it's a really honorable thing to want to do everything you can to please God, but at the end of the day, it's filthy rags.
Yeah. Right.
And that's hanging out with the Pentecostals.
Right.
That's, they're very emotional in that way of there's nothing that we could do. There's nothing that we could do. They're very, very great in that way of everything that we bring to him is nothing. Right. It's filthy rags. We think that they're riches, but they're not. And what he wants is our love and our adoration and our sincere hearts to go follow him.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, that's where things are. It's if you are sincerely turning towards Christ to follow him in every way possible, you're reading the Bible, you're having a relationship with him, you're deep diving into prayer and seeking out his word and what he wants for your life, he will lead you in the way that's best for your life.
Right.
Because there's the story of Bar Jesus where I think it was Paul said, why are you making crooked the straight paths of the Lord? At the end of the day, the Lord's work is going to be done. It's just, are we going to make his paths crooked or are we going to allow them to be straight?
Yeah.
So we all go down these rabbit holes and these loop-de-loops and we come back, but it's all God's path for us.
Right. And I have a pastor, a friend of mine from years ago, he always used to say it like this. He'd say, we can't change God's will.
Yeah.
But we can dictate to God how he's going to deal with us.
Yeah.
In his will, right? Like here's the path. And he knows, all right, Ryan, you're here right now. I'm going to put you over here. You're going to get here some way.
Yeah.
Now, the right way is just going to take you on a straight line, and you're going to smooth sail. But if you're going to buck the system and go this way and this way and this way, and you're still going to get over here. The end result's going to be the same, but you're going to be beaten and battered by the time you get over here because you weren't following me. You were trying to go off. But I mean, so for a Christian, that's the difference, right? Is he's not going to let you go completely off the path.
Yeah.
Because that's the discipline of the Lord, to where a non-believer can be like, woo, I'm going over here, wah, and that's why that's back to like not judging people's salvation per se, but we can kind of tell sometimes if people's lifestyle, again, other than Sunday mornings when they're at church in the pew pretending to be a Christian, and the rest of the week they're just everything but.
Discernment is a spiritual gift.
Yeah, right.
It's a spiritual gift.
It's a good one.
If you have discernment, you have a spiritual gift.
Right.
So they're going back to spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
God's version of spiritual gifts and the biblical version, I think, is so different, and it's a very gentle, maybe subtle way, I think, than most people believe. They think it has to be this big miraculous thing, and it doesn't.
I think spiritual gifts are. I think the main thing people need to remember is that it's God doing it.
Yeah. It's not us.
Exactly.
We're not doing it.
But then I've been in sermons. I've been in worship services before where they say, oh, God's given you this gift. You have to practice it and you have to get good at it so you can use it for the glory of God. It's like, none of that is biblical. No. He does it through me whenever he wants to.
Yeah.
I mean, my job is to be attentive and to be seeking him in everything that I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
But I may do that. He may decide never to use me ever. And that's totally fine. Yeah. Or he might use me every day. That's also totally fine.
Maybe you think that he's not using you, but it's in such a subtle, gentle way. Maybe it's in so many small ways that you won't realize it.
Right.
And what is it? The proverb where it's the glory of kings to seek out the mysteries, and it's the glory of God to conceal them.
Right.
And I think that's another, like, the spiritual gifts go into that. Like, it's the glory of God to conceal his plan and to do all these miraculous things. But it's also our glory to seek it out and to try to discover what's going on. So we're never going to know everything, but it's really fun to try to guess.
Yeah. So I want to go back to real quick. So usually with people that grow up in the church, especially when they're as young as you.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a moment where you had kind of your own salvation experience, or do you like at what point would you say that you actually got saved? Would you say it was pretty early on, like 3 or 4 years old, or do you feel like you got to a certain point where it kind of became your own, as opposed to like what your parents had brought you up to believe?
I have never not been a Christian. Okay. Yeah. You
think you were born a Christian?
I mean, I don't know about that, but
there had to be some point where you weren't, right?
I cannot. There's not a. It was funny too, because I was just talking about this the other day with somebody, where it's like I almost feel left out because everybody has these salvation stories of like this time in their life where they had nothing and then God changed it all, and like they were able to come to Christ and turn from their evil ways, and I'm like, I just grew up a Christian. So
were you talking to Laura about that? Because she was saying the same thing to me the other day.
I think it's a common feeling that happens when you're a kid that grows up as a Christian.
Because they're down in LA, they're part of like a young adult group, right? And she's like, oh, these other women have like these amazing testimonies of like, oh, the Lord pulled me out of this, and I was involved in this, and then I got saved. She's like, I just kind of like grew up in the church. Like, I don't, I can't remember.
It almost feels like maybe you should have like had some experience, but like that's not necessary. We all have our own journey that we're taking.
Sure.
But no, there's never like a pivotal moment for me. So but I definitely see the hand of God work, especially right now with all the transition that's happening with like us possibly moving and all of these like what would be seemingly random events occurring.
Right.
Where like we see the hand of God at work. My husband and I do.
Yeah. I like how you say seemingly random, because they seem random to you maybe, but you know that there's an orchestrator that knows what he's doing.
It's crazy looking back and like asking God, like, please do this thing in my life. I give it to you. I don't care how it gets done. And then years later, you start to notice like all the little things that happened that led to this big thing. And you're like, whoa, like that was God the whole time doing this. And I was just there. I wasn't even doing anything.
Yeah. And that's the way it is for me too. Like I hardly ever know what God's doing in the moment.
Yeah.
But then I can look back, sometimes even years later, and be like, oh, wow. He was preparing me for this 3 years later or something, you know?
One of my favorite not analogies, verses, I guess, it's when it's talking about how God is a lamp to our feet. So lamps don't give off that much light in the dark.
Right.
You can only see a few feet in front of you. You're not going to see the end result. Right. You don't get to see the destination. I can't look from Seattle at Santa Maria, California and like be able to see it. It's a slow process of him guiding you one step at a time.
Right.
And you just have to trust.
Yeah.
And I don't want my path to be extra long and crooked.
Right.
I want to get on the highway, the 101 and make it all the way down to the destination with endurance.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
But when you're a Christian and you're diligently seeking out the Lord and you're praying and you're reading your Bible, like he'll lead you, I think, a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Than maybe some other people.
Sure.
I don't want to drag my feet and take my time.
Yeah. But that's always difficult too, because like when people say, well, I got this decision or whatever, and I need to know what to do, and someone says, well, just read the Bible. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't tell me like you got you have a
God
potential move.
God doesn't care what car you buy. I'm sorry.
Right. But even something like moving from Seattle back here.
Yeah.
You're not going to find any Bible verse that says, Brianna, I want you to move back to Santa Maria. Right? You won't see that, right?
No.
So this is where like this whole idea of seeking the Lord and praying and Lord, make it clear. But even then it's like, what does make it clear? Like you can take some of these things that are happening in your life right now and see them as possible signs, right? Like, well, obviously seems like doors are opening.
Yeah.
He's being offered a job, this thing happened with his brother and now, he'd be with his mom. Like all these things are happening out of your control, really.
Yeah. Well,
but does that mean 100% you can jump in and say, we know for sure this is what God wants us to do?
I don't think 100% is ever a possibility because you can't 100% know what God has for your life. Right. But this is something we prayed for a long time, and there were absolutely no doors opening up. Okay. It was a lot of hard, grueling, long work ahead. And then all of a sudden, God is slowly showing us a path that leads to a door.
Yeah.
And it was not an option before, and it is now. Wow. So it really does feel like... it doesn't just feel like, I know for a fact that this is God giving us an opportunity and answering a prayer. And he doesn't always say yes to prayers. Right. He's not a genie in a lamp. You can't just ask for whatever you want. You have to be willing to give up your desires in order for him to do what he needs to do. Yeah. It's a total surrender. Yeah. You have to actually give up your life. You have to pick up your cross and follow him. And I think that's why so many people don't like that message. Because they're so self-centered again, right? They're well, I got plans for myself. I want to give up my life. What are you talking about? I wanted to travel the world and live in a van with dreadlocks, and there you go. Did not end up doing that. Hey, you still might. Who knows? I don't want to live in a van anymore. I'm on my third kid. I've got a golden retriever and 2 cats and a husband. I'm not living in a van. Yeah, maybe after all your kids are grown and they're out, they got their own families, and then you and your husband will be, old and living in a van. Yeah. And then it'll happen. Who knows, Well, I'm the passenger princess when it comes to traveling, so I don't know. I don't know if Michael would want to drive around a van for that long. Oh, man. All right, so before we are already past 3 hours. Awesome. Sweet. So let's talk a little more about the church not doing its job as far as outreach and just like some of the failings that you would see from the church. I mean, okay, so first of all, let's talk about what we mean by the church. When you say the church, do you mean like the collective whole of everybody that's saved, or do you mean like churches? So, I think going back to core doctrine, the one thing that's talked about over and over again, especially from Paul, after every controversial topic, he'd literally, almost every single time, he talks about unity immediately after. he has clear instructions. The Bible really has clear instructions, but it always goes back to unity in Christ.
Yeah.
That we need to be of one mind. And we need to be seeking out the core doctrines so that we can link arms with our Christians.
Yeah.
Whether or not, if somebody's rolling around the floor speaking in tongues and another person believes that they're lunatics, and that's fine, like they're fundamentalists, we still need to be able to get together and do outreach together.
Okay.
And talk to people on the street about Christ.
What if people have differing views on outreach? Right? Like what if some people says we need to be out in the streets preaching the gospel to everybody we see, where somebody that might be a little more reserved might say, it's got to be the Lord leading me to do that in order for anything to happen anyway. So I'm just going to hang out and wait until the Lord leads me to do that.
Yeah, well.
So sometimes there's not even unity there, you know? Well,
the Bible says to go out and proclaim the gospel. It doesn't give us really a lot of, this is how you do it. It just, well, I mean, it does kind of, because there's examples of the gospel being preached, like during Pentecost, the very simple gospel.
Right.
We need to be saying the very simple gospel to people and let God do the work. Because if we're not willing to actually say the gospel, then God can't even use us.
So you think that as humans, we should at least be doing that?
Yeah.
And then whether or not they receive that message or not is totally up to God, because he's working on their hearts and vice versa.
Yeah. I think the division of the church is one of the biggest downfalls of the church.
Yeah.
It talks about it in the Bible, about the church being divided. Now, this is not the way that things are supposed to be.
Right.
We need to be willing to lay down all of our possessions for one another and be in complete and total unity.
Yeah.
And, like...
That's socialism.
Well, socialism is is when the government comes in and forces everybody to share.
Right.
Christianity is when everybody loves one another enough to share what they have because they want to.
Right.
And it's out of love and unity in Christ. Those are very different things.
Yeah, that's true.
A corrupt government's never going to have the will of God on their hearts. But you know who does have the will of God on our hearts? The Holy Spirit. The church is supposed to be run by the Holy Spirit. It's supposed to be run by the teachings of the Bible through, hundreds of writers or however many writers.
Right.
The discernment of the Holy Spirit and the life of Jesus Christ. And that needs to be our foundation in our faith. And I think for a long time the church was really united, even though they had their issues. There was like a couple 100-year period after the death of Jesus and the resurrection where the church was getting on its feet and it was in unity. And there were issues in the church, but the church wasn't at war with each other like they are today.
Right.
There wasn't this division where people are calling each other like unsaved for just believing like Calvinism.
Right.
That's a secondary belief.
Yeah, but like, what about like, especially today, and we're getting more and more of it, what they're calling progressive Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Where there's this whole, I don't even call them sects of Christianity, because personally I don't think they're Christians.
No.
But where they're saying things like, all that stuff in the Bible about homosexuality, about, it's almost always sexual in nature. All that stuff about, adultery and all this stuff. Who's to say that you can't be in an open marriage and be a Christian?
Well, because when you look at it, the root of it is not in Christ, it's in selfishness.
Of course.
So it's not the worship of God, it's the worship of self.
Yes.
With the justification of scripture that's taken extremely out of context.
Right. Yeah.
So I would not consider that to be Christianity.
Right.
And it's very clear.
So that's a good division then, in a sense. I mean, that, because at least the line is drawn and you could say, yeah, those people over there who are claiming to be Christians, that's not us. Like, don't associate them with us and think that we believe that, because we don't. To where something like Calvinism versus Arminianism is like, okay, we're all still united in the fact that Jesus died for our sins, that he resurrected. All that is still part of our core doctrine. But they believe this, we believe this.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world.
Well, it says to be separate from the world. We're not supposed to look like the world.
Right.
If they're looking like the world like that, they're not Christians.
Right.
Because they look just like the world. I would consider that taking the Lord's name in vain is exactly that. I don't think it's when somebody cusses and says Jesus Christ when they're upset. I think it's when you claim to be a follower of God, but you are not.
Right.
I think that because you are taking the Lord's name, like that you are representative of Christ, when in reality you're nothing like him.
Right.
And we're sinners, and we are all going to have issues, but there needs to be that realization of, well, not even a realization, there needs to be the laying down of pride when somebody comes to you and says that this is what the Bible says. And it doesn't matter what you want, it matters what God says about it.
Right.
And if you are not willing to budge because you don't feel good about it, then you're not actually following God, you're following yourself.
Yeah. Right, which I think is exact representation of what progressive Christianity is.
Yeah.
It's humans saying, you know what? I don't like that part of the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't like that part. So I'm going to live a different way. It's like, who are you? You're not God.
No.
You don't get to dictate to God what's right and wrong. He dictates to us what's right and wrong. And you can like that or not like that, but that's what it is, you know? So
at the end of the day, people just need to follow God. They need to stop doing what they want to do.
Right.
It's not about us.
Yeah.
This was never about us.
Right.
This was about God the entire time. People are losing the plot.
Right. Well, and that goes back into the Torah observance whole thing. Like even you go into the Old Testament and you see God saying things like, you worship me with your lips, but your heart is far. He was always about the heart. He wanted the heart. Yeah. It's like, oh, but he gave the Jews these things to follow. You're right, he did. But he wants their hearts. Yeah. He says your sacrifices are worthless if your heart's not in it. Like I don't just want you doing repetitious, like, duties.
Reminds me of the Catholic Church.
Exactly.
They have all these rituals and they think that they can do whatever they want as long as they confess.
Yes.
They go into confessional and then they say their Hail Marys. They're good.
Right.
That's
I think,
not a heart that follows
there
God.
is such a big similarity between Old Testament Judaism, I should say specifically when Jesus came and what he was combating with the Pharisees.
The tradition.
And the correct.
Yeah.
As there is with the Catholic Church.
It was the traditions that were outside of what he said. I love this analogy that was used. It's if God said not to go to Seattle, the Pharisees would say not to go to Washington State.
Right.
They would draw a line so far around it that you couldn't even get close.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus was fighting against when it came to these people.
Yeah, well, like how they would have whole volumes of books on how to keep the Sabbath. Where like one statement was made, keep the Sabbath holy, you shall do no work on that day.
Yeah.
And they write volumes and volumes of books on what that means.
Well, what does work mean?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what is happening today where, well, what does that really mean? What does it mean to be a woman?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There's man and women. Well, what does being a woman mean?
Woman?
Yeah.
Did you watch Matt Walsh's movie?
I did. It was so funny.
Yeah. That was
Michael
great.
and I were cracking up the whole time.
Yeah.
Because his deadpan humor is
well, right. I love Matt Walsh. I think he's funny. I think the first half I was laughing, but by that second half, it's almost depressing when you realize, like, these people are serious.
Well, that's the
it's not a joke
of their hearts.
Right.
It's just full depravity. It's the will of Satan in its full form, hating the image of God.
Yeah.
People hating the image that God created them in and thinking that they know better than God does for their body.
Right.
It's all connected, I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, for sure.
It's the same problem. It just manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah.
It's the same with abortion. It's the same with war of any kind, of thinking that a human being's life is not valuable because they're on one side of the sand and you're on the other.
Right. Well, we were just talking about that the other day with everything going on in Israel.
Yeah.
And even people are saying, I mean, I'm not going on the record saying I agree with this statement, but a lot of people are saying this is the worst thing to happen to the Jews since the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Well, and that got me thinking about the Holocaust and how, I think I was talking to Asher about it because he didn't understand. He's like, well, I don't understand. Like, I said, well, Hitler was able to convince not all of his followers, many of his followers that the Jewish people were not human.
Yeah.
They were nothing more than animals. So to kill them...
Sounds familiar with abortion.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. If you can convince somebody that something is not a life or not a human life...
They're not of value enough to keep around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why you almost... I'm not going to say you don't fault those people, because you do. They're making the decision to do these things they're doing. But they have a problem in their mind about the truth.
I would say most of the world issues that you see this full depravity taking its full form, it's Satan hating the image of God.
Right.
And we're created in the image of God. Our life is valuable to God.
Yep.
He loves us. He says that we're more of value than any of his other creations, and that Satan can't stand that.
I know.
So all of this is... when Satan is leading somebody, it all comes down to, I know better than God. Right. Did God really say this?
Right.
Let's do outside of his will, because that's the way that we want to do things.
Yeah.
Just to spite him.
Yeah.
Even if people don't see it that way, when you really dig into what's behind it, like that's what's going on.
Sure.
It's like that around every corner.
Right.
You can pick an issue, any issue, and I can tell you how it leads back to Satan.
Yeah. That's probably a wise thing to realize. I would agree.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, now I'm feeling like the water boy. Everything's the devil.
Yeah. That foosball.
Foosball's the devil.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, all right. We're pretty much at the end. Unless there's something else you want to mention, or
I don't know.
Anything you wanted to talk about that you didn't get to talk about?
I don't know. Well, there's a lot of the hippie topics that I really enjoy besides birth.
Yeah.
And respectful parenting.
Yeah.
For example, I don't wear regular shoes. I wear barefoot shoes. And
doesn't barefoot mean no shoes?
No, it's a whole other rabbit hole.
Okay.
There's a lot of
open-toed sandals?
No. Flat shoes that are flexible with no heel and a wide toe box. You want to be barefoot as much as possible, but when you do have to wear shoes, biologically your feet are supposed to be able to spread and be flexible.
So they're shoes, but it feels like you're barefoot.
Yeah.
But does it still protect your feet?
Yeah.
From stepping on glass and that kind of stuff?
So a lot of the barefoot shoes are just a little bit of rubber. They're extremely flexible. You should still be able to feel the ground.
Okay.
Not directly, but
right,
because they're supposed to be protecting your feet.
Okay.
But a lot of shoes that are created today are causing mass issues in the way that our bodies are.
Interesting.
Lots of back and hip and knee issues and.
Well, they used to give me those inserts because they always said I was flat-footed, and that was what was causing my chiropractor would tell me that's what's causing my back problems.
I'd get a new chiropractor.
Yeah.
I have a functional chiropractor. She's nervous system based.
Okay.
So she doesn't just do skeletal muscular stuff. She does. Yeah. She works with the whole nervous system.
Okay. Which
is one of the most important functions of the human body, and it goes back to regulation and attachment and the way that our hormones and our body regulates itself.
Yeah.
But so
how much do these shoes cost generally?
It depends. Some of them are really cheap.
Just like any shoes, they got the high-end brands, and then you got your your low-end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and because a lot of the companies are smaller, I think most of the brands are more expensive because they're handmade. But you can find barefoot shoes that are affordable.
Barefoot shoes. That sounds like an oxymoron. It sounds like
I know, right?
That's like dry water,
Trust
or
me.
something. It's just.
You look into barefoot shoes, you're going to find a whole other rabbit hole, and then you're going to be like, wow, birds are not real.
Birds are not real.
I'm just kidding. Because that's a conspiracy,
Okay.
Once you start opening up doors and you look behind who's the man behind the curtain?
Right.
You realize that everything's got a curtain and there's a man behind it, and you've got to look behind it to see the truth.
Right.
You look into even something as simple as shoes.
Yeah.
You'll find there's a man behind the curtain, and that things are not the way they're supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So someday in glory, we
Yeah.
won't have all that stuff anymore.
I believe we'll be barefoot.
Yeah. Yeah. But there won't be anything hard on the ground either for us to step on.
I'm currently wearing toe socks, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those the ones that
Yeah.
they look like mittens? Okay, yeah. I bought some of those for Bethany one time.
They're so much better for your feet.
Yeah?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
So I can go in a million different rabbit holes for the crunchy man lifestyle.
Yeah, crunchy. That's what I was going to ask you, if you consider yourself to be crunchy.
I would consider myself to be crispy.
Crispy?
Yes.
Okay. Is that more than crunchy?
I would say so.
Okay, so that's a step beyond. Because Alora told me she's scrunchy.
Yes.
Which is like not quite the level of crunchy, but a little, you know, because she has like some hippie tendencies, but not all the way.
So a silky mom is the mom that drinks the Coke and gives her kids Tylenol and doesn't, you know, does the vaccine schedule and doesn't care. You know, just follows the norm. And then when you're scrunchy, you're kind of in that middle where you know, maybe you'll buy some organic food.
Right.
Maybe you'll do like a home birth. When you're crunchy, you've seen behind the door and you want to keep looking behind the door and you want to see what there is to see and like find all the best possible, most natural things. And then there's the crispy tier of like, this is your identity of like, my identity is I want to be as natural as possible. And I mean, I'm not fully there. I guess.
Can you ever be though in this world? I mean, can you ever be fully natural? I don't think it's even possible.
No, like for example, I'm 6 months pregnant and I was craving Pop-Tarts, so I ate an entire box in one day. Yeah. And that is not a good food for you.
Those are good for you. Those the high nutritional value.
I saw the endorphins of the happiness it gave me, and I thought this is the way.
What flavor?
Right now, the brown sugar ones. Yeah. Brown sugar cinnamon.
That's your craving?
Yeah, haven't had it in years, but pregnancy. All rules go out the window.
Yeah. Very cool. So, all right. Well, cool. This was fun.
Yeah.
Very awesome. Thank you.
This is a great conversation.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Do me a big old huge honking favor and leave a review of this podcast. And I eagerly await your feedback, so please email me at whycan'twettalkaboutthat@proton.me. Now here's a clip from next week.
Well, it's because I can't be vocal about this. I think today we're in such a society of such pansies, and I'm not saying everyone's a pansy.
Right.
I just think that there's a lot of influence from higher ups. Where they could do so much better with their influence to encourage people to be strong and stand up rather than be so offended by everything.
Yes.
Like, there is so much offense to everything.
Right.
And it's even gotten to the point where I listen to 98.5 Talk Radio. I've just started doing that recently. That's like kind of like my new old man thing. And they're even saying that people need to stand up.
Yes.
And be vocal about, like... Right. You can't, we can't keep living this way.
Right, I agree.
Or else we are going to stunt and stun and literally kill the next generation for having any type of success because they're going to go through thinking that I just need to complain and I'll do what I want. Rather than work hard for it.